Okay, right, that should be ready.
So, yes, and I believe that I am recording as well.
Uh-huh.
Um, so, do the thing, Englander.
Yeah, it's coming up. Hold on.
Okay.
Yeah, do
There
the
we go,
thing.
it's on. Right, you got it?
Oh gosh, that reminds me. The only thing about the Legend of Korra that I ever liked was like that eccentric inventor character is always like, Vera, do the thing. Only enjoyable part of after
That's
season one,
otherwise
I will say.
terrible show.
Well, season one wasn't actually. Season one wasn't
It
too
was
bad, but like
tolerable.
looking
It was
back on it, eh.
oh, they screwed up Amon so bad. Could have been such a great character. I used to do a podcast. What do I want to call it that? I guess it was
Well, that
video.
reminds me, actually, was a YouTuber that I follow. Actually, wait a minute. So this is how the stream starts. We're talking about Legend of Korra.
Yeah, we have a actual intro, we're just kind of jumping straight in.
Jump straight
Yeah.
into it. Well, why not?
Fair enough.
They screwed up. Thanks. Oh, okay. Thank you. Sorry, I asked my fiance to come hand me something. My phone because I need to do it. Oh, shit. My sponsor wants me to record phone-based coverage of their service instead of from desktop. I don't know. They really want people to use it on mobile. I'm going on. I'm talking about my personal shit. Who cares? Other thing is that I used to do a well, for years and years I was a presenter at various conventions all across the United States, and by across I mean East to Midwest. And I used to do a panel on villains and what makes a good villain, and what are the how do we define what's a good villain? And we often would bring up Amon as being like, what a waste. You had such good setup for that character, and you absolutely squandered it. Thanks, showrunners. Uh, Byrne and I forget their names. The people who made Korra. Hello, by the way. Let's. Sorry for the weird. Very.
Our first big guest on the Humble Truck Cast.
Hello.
Like to introduce yourself. I assume almost everyone who's going to be watching this later will know who you are before they know who we are,
The
but
the four people who are watching this.
Who cares? Look, you gotta get your stuff out there.
Exactly, yeah.
That's what you gotta do. Hello,
yeah.
I'm Aydin Paladin. I do a YouTube channel, and now I have my own pod. Although, yeah, I think it's gonna.
Well, feel free to name drop it. It's much bigger than
Sure.
ours.
If you, well, I mean, so far I'm waiting for monetization. That's what I'm waiting for, so that because I'm having problems with Streamlabs. But it's doing quite well for a brand new show. We streamed for 7 hours last night and got concurrently for the entire time somewhere between 40 and 50 viewers on a brand new show, which was that was pretty cool. That was very neat. I appreciate everyone who showed up there. But again, Aydin Paladin, that's my name, Aydin. And Paladin spelled the way you would normally spell. No weird Y's in there. And then my new show is called The Broken Crown, which I'm doing with my co-host Spoon, who also does a YouTube channel. He chose a name that's obnoxious because it's difficult to find. So you know what you're looking for on YouTube because it's such a generic name. But
Yeah, well,
he does
the main thing that.
yeah.
Sorry, continue.
Oh no, just our podcast is called The Broken Crown. If you're interested in checking that out, we're gonna do it every Wednesday at around 8 o'clock UK time, which is what like 2 p.m. I think Eastern, I believe. It depends.
Yes, it's a much more reasonable, manageable time in the U.S. than it is in England.
Well, yeah, around this time last night we were doing it, but that's a whole issue. Sorry, I'm already going off on a tangent, which is that it's hard for me. I like to go onto other people's shows, but when they stream from the U.S. and you're streaming late at night, if it's 8 o'clock when you stream, which is like no problem. I love going on things like Flashcast, for example. I love hanging out with Adam and Sitch. All great guys, but great folk. But the problem
One
is,
remembers the abs licking controversy.
That's
oh
that's
god,
that's the only video I remember seeing of you. It's just that one. That's the only one I've
well,
seen you in.
because I was just, I don't know why I got brought into that. It wasn't like I was just saying like you're not listening to what AA was trying to say.
Yeah, I think it is. I think what's it? I don't. I think probably it was them doing
And I think that
I don't
AA got a
actually
little bit
know them,
pissed at
so
me for my reaction because my reaction was
yeah.
I think that I'm not disparaging AA. He's a great guy. He invited me to his conference. I wasn't able to go because of freaking COVID, but I wrote a write up for it for the conference. I wrote a piece for it. I think if you went and you got a booklet, there should have been, I believe there was a bit that I wrote
I
that was
thought
in
it
there.
wasn't just a booklet. I thought they made a whole book, like a
Yeah,
300-page book with everyone's speech.
right. And that was whoa, that would have been my speech. Was mine was on major histocompatibility complex and the problem of the
Yeah.
pill. And so that should be in the booklet or book somewhere in there is my write up. I
Yeah.
wasn't able to go, but I think he didn't understand my thing either because I also think the ab licking thing, what I couldn't understand and what I still can't understand, just the dumbest argument and just the dumbest debate in the history of debates. And there's been some dumb ones. Who cares about licking tomboy abs? I don't see why this is the threat to Western values.
Well, I think
There's like a million before it. Do you know
It's
what I
not
mean?
the
AA wasn't
yeah.
he
I
wasn't
mean,
focusing on the licking of the abs. It was more of just the kind of subversion of the
both of
original
them are
gender roles.
universal,
I think that he was trying to go for.
subversive, harmful.
Well, sure, and I agree, right? And again, this is like with Adam and Such. It's a comedy show, so they weren't taking it seriously. I wasn't totally taking it seriously because I don't think it's a serious issue, comparatively to like everything else. I don't mean to be diminutive,
But
but
I
like
did
we got
think,
some way bigger issues in the West than tomboy ab
yeah,
licking. So I found,
yeah.
and the only reason it got brought up for me and why I found it silly, and I will say this, is because AA made like a bunch of responses to them, like hour
They were
long
fairly
responses.
intelligent though. If
Of
if
course they
if he had
were.
made those
That's
as their own videos and not in response to anything, I would have loved them.
yeah, it was the in response where I was like, I look, I know Adam and Such to a certain degree, and they don't take stuff seriously, and you can't like don't. And this is no offense to them. I think they would know this and wouldn't get offended. I would hope so, but they're not. Even though they're smart guys, they're not like intellectual heavyweights that are coming in here with serious arguments. Most of the time, they're shit. By the way, if you would like to have an example of how of this in action, if I go down to centrist militia right now, is it in
Oh
Centrist Militia? Or is
dear.
in the other one? No, it's the other one. It's in Laser Addicts. So isn't it? Oh no, they've changed it now. I think, but for a while, yeah. Okay, so they've changed a whole part of their servers. Now it just says Monarchy Zone. This is just to make fun of me, okay?
Mm.
Like, it's just to make fun of me for being a monarchist. That's fine. It's a joke. So I think AA kind of like took their flippant sort of. No, I don't think they like AA. By the way, I think they actually quite dislike him. But
Yeah,
I
I
Mm.
think that they do. I think that's the main thing. Like I think they weren't being good natured as
no,
AA would have. Because
totally
like
percent.
AA does have a sense of humor. I think
Oh,
maybe
I'm
it's
well
they
aware.
were. Yeah.
But
Um.
he's not the only person they're like that towards. That's just kind of their nature, and I understand.
Yeah.
Like, look, they mock everybody. They're mocking me. Their their server is now a joke. Is now dunking on me being a monarchist. Like, there's a whole section of it. It's just like let's make fun of Aiden being a monarchist. By the way, I think it's hilarious. I actually do think it's funny. Like I honestly think it's funny, and I go hang out there like every time I get drunk and have insomnia on
So
Discord.
yeah, this has been some lovely rank punditry. Shall we get to the actual
All right, let's get
topics
to real
for
stuff.
I
today's
mean, we were
podcast?
just going to jump into
So
Yeah.
some even more rank punditry, so I really don't mind just carrying on this conversation, to be honest.
It's
yeah,
all
because
fine with me.
I mean,
so we've got a bit of a slightly nerdy rank punditry here.
mm,
Evander, why don't you rattle off the list?
okay then. Well, we've got some 12 base maths, which is an interesting suggestion from Lobster. I'm not really sure where he was going with that, but I suppose we'll just talk about that in a second. Then
Base 12.
we're going to kind of go on to
Interesting.
some metric versus imperial measurements. Obviously, I'll be going for the latter. I don't know what the rest of you will be going for. We've got some tradition and symbology in Dawnshire, so I suppose that will be the part where we will introduce the project of Dawnshire to Aydin Paladin. Um, then we're going to talk about some sort of healthy and wholesome upbringing in Dawnshire. It was a discussion that me and Lobster had over the kind of when would the when would the sort of government intervene? In this theoretical society, whether if say a family was being completely degenerate or whatever and raising their children in a completely unhealthy way,
Mm.
when would be the moment at which that the government would actually step in and deal with that? Um,
The government should not step in to do anything, in my opinion.
well, we'll talk about that in a second. So we're
That's
gonna
why we brought you on, so
exactly,
that
yeah.
we can have intellectual
Well, again, for in terms of intellectual diversity, I don't. There's not a whole hell of a lot of anarcho monarchists out there, but hello, here's my bizarre position.
Oh, you're
Because
an
it makes sense. You gotta
anarcho-monarchist.
think. Yeah, you gotta think about it a little bit,
Ah,
but
okay.
it does make sense. So there you
That's
go.
that's the kind of
There's
Yeah,
dozens of
because like
us,
how? Yeah.
dozens.
Well, yeah.
that's
Well,
quite
like
wacky.
how much smaller? How much small? Well, I mean, it makes sense if because like how much smaller can the government get aside from just, if you have only one person in charge?
Precisely.
Smaller
So
does it get?
for me, and I talk a lot to some agorists, and I'm interested in their politic and their beliefs. I don't agree with it, but I think they have some good points, very good points. So again, not to divulge or excuse me, to get away from the topic too much, but that's where I'm coming from. Just to be clear, I don't know where I actually have no idea where you guys are coming from, but where I come from is I want to maximize individual liberty, and I think the way that you do that is by minimizing government. And if you have one head of the snake, far easier to cut that head off than if you have a multi-headed hydra, which is what you get under any kind of democratic system, even a democratic republic.
Well,
So that's why I'm
when someone mentions Tolkien to me, well, sorry, if someone mentions anarcho-monarchism, I immediately jump to something like Tolkien in this kind of
yeah,
vision of a Shire-like society, or that
yeah.
sort of thing.
I think yeah, I love Tolkien, and I think that he, well, obviously was an incredibly intelligent man, and
Yeah.
I think find some stuff in there to be supportive of that kind of ideology. And it's not just me. It's not I didn't make this up. Many people have believed this over the course of history, and in fact, it's kind of forgotten or lost political philosophy. It's been lost by the Enlightenment, and I think we
Mm.
need to go back and look at it again. That's my only point.
Yeah. Which is one of those that's one of those interesting paradoxes of the Enlightenment, where what the Enlightenment was trying to do, at least in theory, was to sort of to liberate man, but thing that ended up actually happening very often was like there were all kinds of like libertarian philosophies and politics that existed before the Age of Enlightenment that were sort of forgotten afterwards.
Well, a problem with the Enlightenment, and there are many, is that what the Enlightenment sought to maximize was freedom, not liberty. Freedom and liberty are not the same thing,
Hmm.
right? And that's where I think the problem with the Enlightenment comes from is freedom and this idea of democracy. Even though, by the way, like the American founding fathers and a lot of other, but if you look at the French as well, and the French Revolution philosophers, or those who preceded the French Revolution, none of them actually had none of them really had, some of them maybe, but most of them did not have very positive things to say about the idea of democracy. They were looking at the past, they were looking to Rome, they were looking to Greece, and they saw, that didn't turn out great, because what inevitably becomes is mob rule, and mob rule is ruled by the idiots. To be honest, people will
Yeah.
make bad decisions, and that's a problem with the Enlightenment, is the idea that people make good decisions for themselves. They do not,
Well, and that's
and
the
I
thing
think
People are
that's
too. Is
not
like I
people.
would
The
say,
individual's not inherently rational,
no.
at least in my mind.
That
The
that's
vast majority.
correct,
well,
and
yeah. What's
that's a lie of the
yeah.
Enlightenment. I would say that's a lie that is in the modern Gestalt, because of our
Mm.
Enlightenment, if you want to call them values, is the idea that the individual knows what's best for him. No, very often not. And
I
I
mean,
will explicate and illustrate this by lighting up a cigarette.
I mean,
Right?
literally,
Well, like
literally,
I would
COVID's
say
what
right
has been
from
happening in the last few years has just been emblematic of what's been of just how we are not. The vast majority of us are not rational, and will not just kind of question narratives by ourselves.
yeah. Oh yeah. Well, because people
Right.
get so radicalized on the whole yeah, just on everything.
Well, I mean, I can tell you this is I spent my life, if people are not aware of me again, and that's totally cool. Obviously, I am myself a tiny YouTuber. Um,
Tiny YouTube, you've got
in
121,000 subscribers.
in the big scheme of things,
Yeah.
but I'm not PewDiePie, right? So, but the reality is that um, well, the reality that just to reiterate, my background is in social science and social psychology. Where I come out of it specifically is when you apply to doc school, they ask you to define your primary and secondary area of study. My primary and secondary area of studies, primary is group communication or group psychology. My secondary area is video game studies. Don't worry about that one. Digital communication. But that's my digital communication is what we call it. But because I was a comm major. But uh, outside of that, though, the other thing that you're asked to do when you enter doc school is you need a mission statement, essentially. And my mission statement was to contribute positively to the wealth of human knowledge, and that's all I do. That's my life goal. I've never dropped that one. That's it. So that's all you need. If you want to understand me, there you go. That's what I wrote in my doc school application, and I did get in. I just flunked out because I suck. But no, I didn't really flunk out.
Well, that is
I
pretty
quit.
neat. Yeah.
I quit because it was really stressful. An
Yeah. So
unfortunate
that
thing
that
is,
was
yeah.
a lovely tangent. So
Yes, I think we
Sorry,
best
continue.
carry on, I suppose. Otherwise, we'll be here for quite a long time. So we've kind of
Yeah,
got.
sorry.
No, it's fine.
That's my nature. People tell me to shut up. Go ahead.
So we've got oh yeah, the next one's warrants. We're going to kind of talk about lobster, wasn't it, to do with
when
people going trespass or
well,
the government trespassing on property and that kind of thing.
yeah. Well, the thing was, like theoretically, like we couldn't have anybody making or selling crack or other drugs on Donshire. At least, well,
Why?
theoretically, we wouldn't want that.
Why? And then what? Why? And how would you enforce that? And why do you care? That's my big question. Why do you care what people do?
Well,
It's
that's
their
why
personal
exactly.
decision.
That's why we're talking about it.
Mm.
That's why
Sure, sure. But I'm asking the question.
we're
What?
talking about it.
Exactly. I'm asking this question in good faith. Why does it matter if someone decides that they want to do crack?
AA could say something much more intelligent than me, but
Yeah,
I suppose it's just like, well, it's not what it does to one person, it's what it does to the whole community. One person doing something degenerate most of the time doesn't just hurt them.
I
I
think as
agree.
well
I agree.
as well.
However,
Let's go on. Sorry.
sorry. Continue. No, no.
Well, I was
Please.
going to say the
Ooh,
So you as an anarcho-monarchist would want to maximize human freedom, wouldn't you, as much as possible? And you would see,
Liberty, not freedom.
sorry, liberty,
Liberty.
yeah. Another lens you could look at freedom is how you would gain freedom is by kind of the amount of kind of addictions people have, and throwing the less addictions you have, the more free you are. So in our current society, we have things, loads of people are kind of entangled in porn addictions and whatever. Is that
Well,
is that
these
really
aren't
is that
these
really
aren't.
freedom? Is that, sorry, liberty? Is that what liberty is? And
No,
is
that's not
that
what
good?
liberty is.
Is that what?
That's actually that is freedom. Actually, not liberty.
Okay.
The freedom to do screwed up shit and mess with your own life. But however, so it got me a little bit on this in that I think people should be free to do things that are bad for them because that's their right, and that's freedom. That's not liberty. That being said, though, I understand that these things are degenerate and they're messed up, but can you point to me in history where when those kinds of rights to okay, let me try to reiterate. Sorry, let me reorient myself. When in history, restrictions on people's rights to mess themselves up. Let's talk about prohibition, for example. That's the most obvious example of it. How does that work when you tell people they can't drink alcohol?
I'm sure AA would come in here and say that prohibition works and that kind of thing, but I'm not too educated on that subject to reply.
shoot, shoot.
Okay,
I
well, it
unmuted
didn't work. Is
myself
your
by
reality is
accident.
Yeah.
prohibition did not work.
Well,
How
the thing that I would say is, I guess it depends on how you're applying all these things, because
sure.
there's plenty of companies that have it where like you've got to be sober when you go to work. So
And how do they determine that? How do they determine that? Are they
yeah,
gonna
you're
I
right.
get
mean,
Drug tests and things. You're right.
drug
It is
tests?
fairly
the thing is, the
You're right.
thing.
It is fairly invasive.
It's invasive, and they're gonna have to do it on a regular basis,
I mean,
right?
part of the
The
reason
the
why.
the reality is that why it doesn't work, just real quick, why it doesn't work is because people will do it behind the back of the government. They will always find a way. People will want to maximize their freedom in any way that they can. If you restrict them from
Yes,
having
even at
access
their
to
own
some kind of
risk.
degenerate thing, they will find a way. That's what they did. That was the rum runners.
Sorry.
That was what happened under prohibition. Now, today, for example, in the United States, in many states, it's still illegal to smoke weed or to sell weed. Does that stop
Yeah.
anyone from smoking weed?
I mean, part of the reason why
It's no
degeneration has
different than
increased
other.
in current society is mainly because the means by which they may do so has increased. So in ancient times or whatever, you wouldn't be able to smoke crack or whatever and do whatever kind of drugs, and you wouldn't have the
Yeah, there
means
was
of
no
doing
drugs
so.
at all.
When an ancient, well, okay, well, this is a crack is a modern invention. That's
Going a bit,
why.
yeah. I was going into the
Yeah,
Uncle
well,
Ted,
also it was
Uncle
much more
Ted way there.
difficult to distill liquor in the past as well. It was very easy to
You
brew
can,
beer and to
I can
age
make
wine, but it
liquor
was
right.
very difficult to distill liquor in the past. Or the
Have you
Iron
tried?
Age, I want to say.
Yeah, I guess so. But you can make wine in a barrel. Like you can. Well, I bought one on Amazon or whatever, like years and years ago, and I made basically I'm gonna call it bathtub wine, just
Hmm.
as an experiment to try and do it. And I don't recommend. Be very careful. You got to buy the right equipment. If you don't buy the right equipment, because I was told, oh, you can use a balloon. You don't actually need this exact piece of equipment. Um, to make sure that the air doesn't escape. Don't use a balloon, by the way, because a second that any of that liquid gets into the balloon and drops down into the um, what you're brewing, it will make the whole thing taste like disgusting latex. I made horrible garbage watermelon wine. Don't do it. It's nasty. I don't know what inspired me to do that. It was a bad idea, but I basically destroyed an
Probably
entire
make
batch.
good vinegar with that, though. You could probably make a good vinegar with that. A lot of
You
things
probably
that
could.
don't make good wine do make good vinegar.
I love vinegar, but like yeah,
Like maple vinegar is good, but maple
I've
rum
never had
is
maple vinegar.
terrible.
I've never had a maple vinegar, but I'm now gonna seek that out and try it. Um, yeah, the reality is like with wine and alcohol, you really can't prevent people from doing that. And by the way, like talking about something like lean, I think it's called, or where you just take a bunch of Robitussin or whatever, and you throw it and you like crystallize it. I think that's what is that called? Actually, I don't remember. But
Hmm.
it's really easy to make. Like that's DXM. I think that's what it's called, right?
I suppose perhaps drugs was a bad example because
Yeah.
I
You,
suppose that's something that like the monarch or whatever the state fixtures of Donshire wouldn't necessarily have to worry about because idea would be to
so
move a lot of that power more so onto the family, and if there's like one member of a family that is like that is doing troublesome things like that, their family is going to take care of it theoretically, probably.
well, that's a far better way to deal with this from a familial system. Obviously, I agree
And of
completely.
course, well, that's actually a thing that I was considering at one point. It's like, should clans and also like the authority of churches be something that is like
Ah,
enshrined in the Constitution of
good
Donshire,
question.
essentially partially as a check on state power, and partially also just perhaps as a way of regulating people's behavior as non-invasively as possible.
Well, again, if the family's doing it, and by that I mean being like, "Hey, Uncle Bob or whatever, maybe you should stop getting so fucked up." Like we're gonna disassociate from you. We're gonna shun you a little bit familially, and you do it on a family level, and that's entirely voluntary. My big issue with all forms of government is that any form of government that's not voluntary is tyrannical inherent. That's my contention. Any form of government that it's not entirely voluntary is a little bit totalitarian. So
even if
the
that
reason why
even if that government were promoting something that would be healthy and I suppose or harmonious to a society, like or non-degenerate, you would still be opposed to that if it didn't have the voluntary consent of the masses.
again, in terms of the degeneracy stuff, I don't think you can really.
Yeah.
Okay, let me reword myself again. Stuff like alcohol consumption, stuff like cigarettes or whatever, that kind of stuff. You can't mandate it. People will do it. People will find ways to get around it. They will find ways to sell and make and grow weed. They'll find ways to sell and grow tobacco. They'll find ways to make bathtub liquor. That stuff you really can't control at a government level. That would have to be societal. Government can't do that at all. It has proven itself time and time again to be incapable. The degeneracy stuff, it's the same issue. And by degeneracy, I mean porn, for example. Like talk about porn. By the way, I think porn is a horrible, horrible thing for society. I think it has done far more harm than liquor or cigarettes or weed.
This has been a wonderful conversation, but I'm gonna have to leave for a second to
That's all right.
use the
That's all right.
restroom. Be right back.
Go ahead. We'll continue, I suppose. I understand completely. I had it several times in my podcast. We do go for 7 hours, but
So a question I want to ask you is: do you think liberty is the ultimate good then in a society? Is just the ideal?
th-
Do you know where I'm
I
trying to
think
come from?
yeah, that's a difficult question because ideally yes, but liberty need to be tempered, right?
Mm.
True, pure, unbridled liberty. I wish it worked. I do. I really wish we could have a true anarchic system but I don't think it works in practicality, which is why I don't advocate, which is why I advocate for anarcho-monarchy, because I think you need to put it in simplistic terms. You need a father figure to tell you when to stop a little bit.
Mm. Well,
Now
my
where that stopgap is, and like I said, you can't stop people from becoming drug addicts and drunks
mm.
and addicts. You can't stop. If
I
it's
mean,
something that
if you take away
exists,
the means, though, I mean, what can they do if they can't actually obtain these things, drugs wise?
they'll make them in their own home. They'll do it outside of government involvement. So
But
you can't
it's far more difficult than just going to the on a back
totally.
street corner and getting something.
But
If
unfortunately, what that
people wouldn't be
yes,
exposed to these things in the first place if there weren't those means by which they could get them.
mm, socially they will be. People will know about these things. You can't lie to people. Lying doesn't work. It will lead to psychological reactions inherent. When you try to tell people they can't do something, they will say, "Fuck you, I will do what I want." And that's a reality of human psychology that cannot be dismissed.
Mm,
Psychological reactions is a reality that we have. I
I,
know
I
we
don't
have to
know.
accept it.
Well, I don't know. Over the past decade, everything we've seen in terms of the rules and regulations coming in, especially COVID. I mean, how do you really think people would just say if the government said you can't do this, would they really react against that and go against it?
It's okay. Excellent way to frame it, by the way. Um,
Thank you.
because you're correct. When you look at the COVID reaction and you see how willing people are to submit to totalitarianism and authority, it's horrifying. But there's a portion of society that will always say no. And when we look at the data, we look into psychological reactance research. It's about what we find with COVID. It's like 25% of people will just always say no. Anything you tell them to do, they say no. No, I won't. I will not. I will not comply. It will always be that there's always going to be a portion of society that will just say no just
Yeah,
because you told them to do something if for no other reason than just because you told them.
but
It sounds
that's a
so
very small
obvious.
minority in comparison to
Twenty-five
the vast
percent.
majority.
25% is significant. I
25%,
mean,
really? 'Cause that's not from my own
extremely strong.
experience.
Wait, could you explicate?
What? Sorry.
Could you explicate? What in your own experience?
Oh, I said. Well, I don't really see kind of mass. I don't really see 25% non-compliance. Is what I'm saying in my own experience. I don't see a quarter of people not
But
wearing masks in supermarkets,
that's the
whatever.
data. That's the reality is that is what we're seeing. 25% of people are not taking the
Yeah,
vaccine, for example. I'm using that.
I
I'm
live in
using COVID
Alabama,
as
and it's a lot
example.
higher than that. And of
And
course we don't have any mandates here, so you end up
Yeah.
seeing like it's less than a quarter of people that actually wear masks in public.
so and for the mask stuff, like okay, when the mask mandate came back into effect here in Guernsey, right? Um,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know when it happened. By the way, we were out at the shop. We were at the shop buying groceries, and we got told to put on. We had our masks. We got told to do it, and because we didn't even know that it was back on, but we still had them in our pockets and stuff, just in case. Because we didn't even know that the mandate was back on here. Because for here in Guernsey, we're a little bit of a different situation than a lot of other places. Very small island. However, the average age here is like 60. A lot of old people, and therefore it is a bigger risk for people here than in other places in the world. And I understand that. I'm very understanding. It's a lot of old people.
Well, with
That being said, though, what I'm
sorry, go
just
on.
to be clear, even though I am willing to comply because I'm just trying to be polite, there's a lot of other people that will say, no, I have an exemption. And we'll just say, nope, fuck you, I have an exemption. They really do, and they'll say no. And what can that person do to you at the shop or wherever when they ask you to wear a mask? And you say, nope, I have an
The
exemption.
thing is, though, if there's enough social pressure, I don't really want to go into another side of compliance, which I'm sure you can know what I'm implying here. Most people have folded on that issue and have, you know, taken up a certain
Well,
uh, medicine.
Okay, so we're working ourselves into another tangent. How
Yeah.
much what did you guys talk about during my absence?
COVID stuff most.
Well, I
Oh,
was just quite curious about just the kind of the thought process of Aydin Paladin. What because you have a pessimistic view of human nature from what you said. Yeah. So what I was trying to kind of get across is how could you square that with an anarchic society?
Well, that's why I don't think you can have a pure anarchic society. That's why I'm advocating for anarcho-monarchism, because the reality is that people will make bad decisions for themselves. They will make silly decisions for themselves all the time. They do. They will. They'll smoke cigarettes, as I just did. They'll drink alcohol, as I am doing right now. They'll do things that are bad for them, despite the knowledge they know it's bad for them. And that's saying when they do know. I'm aware, and I do it anyway. That being said, a lot of people don't know because they don't either don't have the cognitive capacity, or they're cognitive misers. There's this idea called cognitive miserliness, and it's an incredibly prolific um, function of the human psychology, which is that for the most part, people don't want to think because thinking is hard. I don't mean that in a pedantic or just diminutive sense. Thinking,
No,
your brain takes up
Yeah.
so much more energy than any other part of your body.
You know what?
We are designed evolutionarily to not
Okay, I
have
was
to
about
use
to
our
say,
brain
'cause I was gonna
except
sound
when it's
awful.
necessary. Sorry.
Yeah, because it's a huge calorie sink.
So we're designed evolutionarily to only use our brains when it's necessary. Now, people are different on this. This is a trait that we find in people. So some people are high in cognitive miserliness, some people are low in it. Some people are not cognitive miser. That actually, by the way, the most fascinating thing about this, it's actually unrelated to IQ, as far as we can find. In data.
I'm sure it's not. That goes into an interesting question we were having, Lobster, about why are we the people who end up at this position? Why us? I was wondering what your thoughts would be on that, Paladin.
Why? I do think it's largely an IQ thing, but I think it's also cognitive miserliness and that degree to which someone possesses it. There are people who are low IQ but think about stuff a whole lot. They use their brains a whole lot, even though if that brain's not firing on full power, not able to.
Well, those are the sorts of people that stereotypically at least, I'm not sure how true it actually is, but like they're often portrayed as being conspiracy theorists.
Sure.
They are people that are not particularly intelligent, but they use their brains more than most people.
They do, and yeah, they're probably not going to come the correct answer, but they're thinking.
Okay,
they're thinking a lot. Yeah, you might call that a conspiracy theorist. And by the way, conspiracy theorist is not a right or left thing in terms of the political.
I know.
Yeah.
Things are portrayed. Conspiracy theorists on every side. Real for real there are.
Camera, isn't it?
Yeah, I spent enough time on the Political Compass meme subreddit to know that everyone is a conspiracy theorist on all sides of every issue.
Well, were you you have to again, this is a fine line of conspiracy theorists versus looking at reality things that are lies that are being told to you.
I wish I got the Unisong stuff when it was available. I just couldn't.
Yeah, because there's a lot of things that maybe smell like conspiracy theories, but they're not. It's just a weird thing that is true.
I am skeptical of how far being in these spheres correlates to intelligence. It might be more to do with kind of your openness to new ideas. That kind of
sorry, it cut out for a second.
Openness, like the Big Five.
Yeah, I would imagine that it probably does have a lot to do with openness on the Big Five. Sorry, it cut out for me. Yeah, I imagine it does have a lot to do with openness in terms of your susceptibility. I guess you could say that. But also,
so this has been an awesome high IQ. Yeah, speaking of IQ, this has been a very high IQ tangent.
Sorry.
Yes.
Shall we move on to the other? Yes. Shall we move on to the other subjects?
Well,
yes,
I think we kind of covered. We covered the odd point anyway, didn't we? Yeah.
Let's move forward, guys. Sorry about that.
That's fine.
The structure of the Constitution, Englander. Was that basically just going to be like how do we arrange things? Like what is the first thing, or maybe do we want to have any kind of preamble?
Yeah, it's a bit dry. So seeing as we have a guest on, it's probably best to leave that to another time, perhaps.
Oh, if you want to talk about the nature and form of democracy, I would love to, and the Constitution, because I have a proposal.
Oh yeah, that would be interesting. Yeah.
Well, I have the same proposal I've always made. Well, I've been making now for a while, which is Knut Lenin's proposal. If you'd like to hear it, I don't want to like reiterate too many times.
Well, perhaps yes, but there was something rather fantastic that Englander wrote at one time. Englander, do you remember where your little monologue on the two thrones?
Yes.
That is in?
Yes.
Are we talking about a Spartan system?
So, Lobster kind
Not
of
quite. Maybe Well, remember how I told you about how before in Donshire the monarch is called a steward and not a
Right.
king because he is waiting for the true king.
Well, we all
But a sort of
that is very important, by the way. It's something that's built into most of the histories of the European monarchies. Is that
yeah, I
well,
know.
the monarch is always like if he fucks up real bad, God is waiting,
It's
right?
it's something similar to the Chinese idea of the mandate of heaven, except that like in China,
Exactly.
it's just like it's sort of this vague concept. Whereas if we translate that idea into the European context, it's like divine retribution directly from one particular person,
But that
rather
was
than
all
just the
Yeah.
gods and devils.
Well, I have the
that
paragraph
was the
up by
way
the way. If you
that
want me
monarchy
to.
was perceived throughout the history of the European monarchs. Was that
Yeah.
this person is
Um.
beholden to God
Could, and it would be
ultimately.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
Now
they're
it did.
placed in that position by God, aren't they? To serve the roles and
That's right.
responsibilities they have.
Yeah, exactly.
Sorry if I'm interrupting you, by the way.
Um. And of course, yeah. Um.
I do believe a return
Way.
to Christianity is very important for the West in terms of like the degeneracy conversation we were having earlier.
Mm.
I believe that we do need to return to if it's not Christ, it needs to be some kind of religious system because the atheist,
Yeah, I was
screw
thinking that
all.
I was actually thinking Donshire would be broadly Christian, but as far as things must be specified, it would be Abrahamic at the very least. Because as sort of divergent and weird and fractious as Christianity, Islam, and Judaism all are,
Mhm.
they at least resemble each other enough to make sense within within each other's contexts. And I don't think that it's
Yeah.
impossible for them to cooperate in the way that it would be impossible for some other religious
You
systems
might want to
perhaps to
read the
cooperate.
Quran and definitely read the Hadith to think that, but
I actually do have some Muslim friends, so you know what's it?
I
I've basically gotten different
I've read the
reactions
Quran.
from them.
I've read
this
the
is
Quran in Arabic, which is the only way you're allowed to
Yeah.
technically read it. I have read it in
I
Arabic.
feel like there's some sort of
Mhm.
There's some
sensitivity
stuff in
warning
there
maybe
that
on that.
not going to align well with the other Abrahamic religions.
well.
So
This
I
is
hesitate to go
I'm
to
aware.
Islam.
I'm aware. It's just
I
I hesitate to do anything. Not for any kind of modern day political reason. It's because you know that bit in the Bible where what is it when Hagar runs away with Ishmael and God is like he's slightly upset with her but like not very much and he's like, oh, don't worry, the descendants of your child will be like great kings and conquerors and stuff, you know. So it's like I you know, perhaps I am wrong, you know, like a greater theologian than me perhaps could come up with a more rational
Well, I'm certainly not theologian.
idea, but it does seem to me that even from a Christian perspective, still a blessing that seems to exist upon the Islamic people, and so I do sort of hesitate to
Well, I
work
think that
against them too much.
I guess I don't want to get into my theology too much because it would be obnoxious. Well, another big tangent. But
Yeah.
I think that you need why Christianity works so well as a source and basis of society is it's patriarchal. That's why it works because society is inherently patriarchal and it need be based around a patriarch.
Yeah,
Feminine
because
stuff
humans
does
pretty
not
much
work.
evolved that way.
well
Yes, that's it's based it's
Yeah,
this
like
is not
even yeah,
this is
like
not me talking on my ass. This is based on evolutionary psychology, not based on me like being a Christ cuck. Okay, like this is based on evolutionary psychology. Patriarchy stuff works
it,
for people better.
I mean, can I
don't
just jump
worry,
in with
we
you
yeah.
when you were criticizing the Quran? This goes back to a very interesting conversation me and Lobster were having over the kind of what the threat to the West was. So we I would agree with you in the sense that Islam as a force is, yeah, it's a threat to the West, but I would say a bigger threat to the West is
Not
probably
the threat.
secularism.
I know.
Is
If I
secularism.
say that,
Like I feel like an Islamic, like if the West became fully Islamicized, and perhaps I am mistaken, but I feel like it would still be a civilization worth living in. Whereas if the West became fully, what's
atheistic.
it? You know, yeah, became fully atheistic. Like let's say China, because I think China is probably the only functioning atheist state in the
But
world.
they're really not. They're only on the status level. The reality is that individual Chinese people practice ancestor veneration. They practice
Yeah.
a form of religiosity. Like we get told. society, but it's really not. You know, if you look at it deeply, and I agree with
I
you
know, but
100%.
my point is that the state atheism of China is enough to make life miserable in that country,
It's
and I feel like that would be something worse than the Islamification of Europe or even America.
it's not
I
even
actually agree.
it's not even just atheism, as in
'Cause what's it like
staunch rejection
yeah?
of God. It's more just indifference, which is an incredible threat, because that's when consumerism and materialism take root instead.
Yeah, well, because you can't
Precisely
fight
because
indifference in the way that you can fight opposition.
well, when you don't have, and this is the very important part, and I think this is also the part about what's important about monarchy over democracy is that, and I don't remember what I wrote here. I can find it, but I wrote a piece where in my discussion of monarchy, well, in my discussion with Adam and Sitch, where I discussed monarchy, I wrote I could bring it up in a minute, but I don't have it right in front of me right now. But the reality is that what people are seeking, everyone is seeking, is a father figure on earth or in heaven. And
Well,
so
I'd
I
say
agree with
to
you.
live your best life, I think you need both.
Well, you do need the mother figure as well, because the mother figure is welcoming. She's forgiving. She's understanding. That's why we in Christianity, of course, that's why we have Mary, right? And now,
Yeah.
not all Christians venerate Mary the same way that the Catholics do. I'm
Are you
somebody.
Catholic?
Yeah, sort of. I don't know what I am because I'm figuring I'm figuring myself out. I don't have a good answer.
That's fine.
I was a
That's fine.
practicing Norse neo-pagan for 5 years, and
Ooh.
I still hang on. There's something about actually. Now I'm gonna some stuff that's gonna upset people. I actually don't think that it's impossible to not marry the beliefs of Norse neo-paganism or Norse paganism with Christianity. I don't think they're necessarily talking about different things. I think they're using different words to describe the same ideas. That's contentious. Something that people won't agree with probably, but I don't think that the fact that I spent 5 years, making my blood to Tor inherently means that that's not actually in any way unable to be integrated with Christian beliefs. I mean, that's what they did. That's what the Scandinavians did 1,000 years ago, right? They integrated.
Actually reminds me of something. Speaking of like old Norse rituals, there was something that I wanted that would sort of be like a marrying of the like old Norse stuff and like old Christian ceremony sort of stuff. I haven't talked about it to Englander yet, but I talked about it with a different partner of mine in this endeavor, Coco Can, who has not appeared on the podcast yet. She might sometime in the future. Um, which was so you're probably familiar, at least more so than Englander, with the sort of the horse feasts that used to be held 1, 2, sometimes 3 times a year in the old
Yes,
in Germania.
not just in Germania, but across the
They're all
European,
kind of transparent. Okay.
under
Yeah,
different
and
kinds
even
of
in parts of India as well, because it's sort of an
Oh, right,
Aryan
right.
ritual, not just a European ritual.
It's here in I think it's in Hoppa's stuff where he talks about how much time people took off a year. Um, let me start
Um,
feasting. Work.
Oh
should I
yeah,
continue
that
on
was
my
at the
tangent though before you go on
Continue.
yours?
Oh yeah, please.
The sort of the specific though, the not just feasts in general, but the specific horse feast, which was because even though eating horse flesh is not as taboo in continental Europe as it is in England, in basically all of these societies, it was a bit taboo, and there's only one time of year when you'd really do it unless you were starving, one or two, and that was basically at New Year's, at a winter solstice, and sometimes at a summer solstice.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that I was sort of thinking about for Dawnshire was maybe to have some kind of like a big festival during like for the winter solstice, where like basically in like a few weeks before winter solstice, all as part of like a coming of age, as part of a larger coming of age ceremony, all the boys that would be turning like 18 or 20 or whatever the next year, whatever we decide the age of manhood is,
Mm-hmm.
um, would go and with their fathers and with the steward, sort of like all the men and all the young men and all the old men of the village would go to hunt. Would go to hunt mustangs out on like the plains in Wyoming or something.
No, Bonnet,
Yeah.
come on.
And then basically, once enough Mustangs had been harvested to feed the whole, the whole of Donshire with at least a half a pound of horse flesh and a pint of broth, they would return, and
Wild podcast.
and basically there'd be sort of like
a laughed at your roommate.
Oh. Yeah, and so sort of like when the sun sets on the night of the solstice, the sort of like the feast would begin, and the steward would go to what's it, and he wouldn't serve everyone, but he would go to sort of like the lowest table where all the poorest people are sitting, and he would personally distribute the horse flesh and the broth among them before returning to his own place to be served by his servants. Because one slogan or something that I was thinking of for Donshire, or particularly for the steward, was to say that he is the master of many, but he is the servant of all.
Of course, that's the most.
I think it's like
important part
on a mountain, you know,
about a monarch.
Like on a map.
I don't know
Or
if
it's
you want
like
to a steward. It doesn't matter.
Gradient, and then a lion, and
He
another
is-
gradient.
Yeah, well, monarch is the general
Servant.
term, and then it might be a king or a lord or whatever.
Sure, or whatever. But I can't find the exact data on this, by the way. But like, you can look this up. It's very easily findable. It's either in Hoppe. It might be in Jason Brennan's Against Democracy. I can't recall, but this is a very easily checkable statistic. The reality is
Yes.
that under a monarchic feudal system, which I'm not in favor of feudalism, but under a monarchic feudal system,
Yeah, I
that
realized
existed
that, yeah.
throughout most of human history,
Okay.
people had like 180 days off a year. They could do whatever they
Mm,
wanted.
yeah.
Into the
They were
mainframe.
feast days. Huge amount.
Rewarded the super
Half
nuts.
the year were feast days because they were farmers predominantly. So like when you
I
can't
mean-
farm,
I mean, I'll just-
you can't farm. So you're paid, I guess. You're not paid.
Yeah,
by
because
them.
for half the year, either there's
Wrong.
for half the year the fields are either resting or they're full of grain that isn't ready to harvest yet.
Precisely. So to be very clear, like when people talk about like their horrible, goddamn, awful, wagey, cagey job, which is terrible. That is not the
False
nature and
confidence.
natural state of human society. To go to work 365 days or 300 and let's be clear, 300 days a year. I'll give you 65 days off. That's not what most people get, by the way. You don't get 2 months off. Okay.
Yeah.
They got half the year off. But for the state of the wagey cagey is not natural for human society, right? I don't think it is. Doesn't mean that it can't become naturalized, but that's not the way that we
Well,
develop as a society.
I'll make it.
as a species.
Shall I continue though? Because I didn't quite
Yeah,
finish
continue.
with
Sorry,
the
yeah.
ritual, but right. So
I just wanted to
I was
throw that in
thinking
real
is like
quick, sorry.
basically after the feast, after everyone's had their fill, not only of the horse flesh, but just of like all the various dishes that would be served at the winter solstice feast.
No.
There would be like a dance of bones, essentially, where like all the young men that are coming of age, they would take the skulls and almost sort of like a. You probably know the name of it. It's like the New Year's monster from Wales. Mary Lloyd, or whatever it's called.
I'm not familiar.
In
with
like
this,
in a similar.
I'm
It
sorry,
basically
that
it's like a
makes me
horse.
hard.
It's like a guy dressed up in a horse skull and white sheets to be like a ghost or something. It's a very creepy New Year's tradition from Wales. Anyways, but like
Yeah,
in
there's some weird
something
stuff-
like
yeah,
that.
don't put that evil on me, but yeah, there's some weird stuff.
Yeah. Anyways, but basically, so the idea was like then all the young men that that had gone on the horse hunt earlier in the month, would take like the skulls of the horses and they'd do like the bone dance around the bonfire, sort of like in like mock sort of well, basically just meant to like sort of bragging about like, oh, look at this great horse that I have killed. I am such a like a great and powerful thing. But then, like a different dance and a different song begins sort of like in a big ring of like all the girls that are coming of age
I think it means
dance in like a larger circle around the young men. And basically it's like their song would be like the song of civilization. It's like, stop being so prideful and put those old bones away. It's time for you to be a real man and start a family or something like that.
Mhm.
And so then, like, after the girls finish their song, it's supposed to be like the
Kind of
boys
creator
put
samples.
away their the boys would put away the bones from the bone dance, and
Wearing glasses, yes.
maybe even like what's it like? It might be something like they make a ring of like the skulls around the bonfire or something.
Yeah.
And then like after that, like they're like symbolically, it's like they've put away bragging and stuff, and they've sort of like put on like humility or whatever. And then they had the boys and the girls dance together around the bonfire. Would just be like a sort of like a major, sort of like a big thing, like to end the year, I guess, and begin a new one.
Yeah.
Sure. That's a similar.
And-
You see, a lot of
New
the.
album cover just
By
dropped.
the way, if I may ask,
So all that makes sense from like a ritualistic sort of symbolic point of view. Can you see what I'm trying to get at?
yeah, well, I understand completely. Just me thinking about this, sorry, because I was trying to find your podcast. Is it just called Dawnfire? That's where I'll find it.
Well, it's called the Truck Cast because we're fans of AA, and he always calls the audience trucks.
Okay, is your
But
your,
we did make one that was called. It was all about Dawnshire.
okay, just so I can
give you a
like,
link if you
sorry,
can't find it.
just making sure that I want to make. Send me a link. I think you did send me a link before, but
Is
send me a link again so I can tweet it out to people. I know we're pre-recording this, so it's not going to be live, but
this
Yeah.
we'll
It's
make sure that just so I make sure to let people.
Yeah, we didn't really want to try a live stream before we have 100 subscribers.
Well, I did that shit, so I don't know.
is it alright if I go back to a previous point that Paladin was making about the holidays, the bank holidays?
Mhm.
You mentioned that it was the kind of the natural, that kind of way of life was the natural to human society. So this is something I've been thinking about quite a lot recently. Actually,
Mhm.
was because in actuality it was a sort of hunter-gatherer societies, wasn't it? That most
Well,
most
even
of
but this
human
is even
existence
post
has been
hunter
based
gatherer
on.
societies.
Yeah, well,
This was in a farming society, fully settled one.
yeah, well, the agriculture. Well, yeah, what I'm trying to say is that most of human existence has been hunter-gatherer. So I don't know. The question I've been having is how much what's our natural state, I suppose, is probably the best question, the best way I could put it.
Mm. Well, wait, could you reiterate, please?
Sorry, well, the main question, the main kind of thing I've been thinking about recently is to do with what is our kind of natural state? Is it, the the hunter gatherer
Hunter-gatherer,
society of, yeah,
versus the farming.
yeah, because you see a lot of people on the right, they sort of say, oh yeah, we're going to return to the natural way of things, and they point to medieval societies and the kind of
Yeah.
that sort of system. But there's other people who go even further back and say, oh yeah, it's actually the sort of,
Have you read Bronze Age Mindset?
no, I have
Age fervor.
I've listened
Yes.
to him once. What's his take on this?
I think that he believes in kind of what you're not necessarily intimating, but like what you're kind of describing a little bit here,
Mm,
which is that we need to return to like a full kind of anarchistic society, because all of it's fake, all of it is unnatural.
mm,
I don't agree with everything he says, and he gets a little bit confusing later in the book where he just starts talking in like literally me grug, me do, me smack rock with harder other rock.
mm.
Like he literally does that in the book. I'm not joking. I'm only being a little bit facetious, but like he at some point stops using correct grammar altogether and just speaks in caveman. However, it is a very interesting book. Would also recommend if you're gonna read Bronze Age Mindset. You should also maybe read Ted Kaczynski.
No.
Just saying.
Yeah, what's the disclaimer? He's bad. We don't agree with his means,
Oh,
whatever.
he's bad. He did bad things, but
Yep,
however, it doesn't mean like his ideas are bad. Like let's be clear.
yep.
Let's not be silly. He did bad, terrible things, but his ideas are legitimate. So maybe read Ted Kaczynski and
Well,
read Bronze Age
he
Mindset
would he
because
would subscribe to the view of returning to hunter-gatherer societies, wouldn't he? Completely.
they are both, yes, suggesting that if you read their works,
Mm.
not mine, but I think it is really worth reading Bronze Age Mindset. I also think it's worth reading Ted Kaczynski. Everyone I know who's a little bit, if I want to call it, if I want to use this word, enlightened on moving past this.
This is taking so
insane.
long, by the way.
Sorry.
My
but
YouTube. No. I wasn't. I mean my YouTube link. It's taking ages for me to get YouTube to send you the link.
Oh, sorry. But we're stuck in this post-enlightenment obsession with democracy. Makes no
Mm,
sense and doesn't maximize liberty, doesn't maximize
yeah.
freedom either.
That's
Does
yeah,
not.
exactly.
It's a bizarre postmodern religion that does nothing to actually make
Yeah.
people's lives better, or very
Well,
little to make people's lives better.
that's part of what
So
Ted was pointing out. Was I did read his or
exactly,
listen to his manifesto, wasn't it? And he
yes.
was taking sort of he was attacking democracy, saying, one vote. Does that change anything whatsoever about
Of
the
course it doesn't.
entire political system of your country? It doesn't change anything, in the grand
Of
scheme
course,
of things.
that, and it's always that kind of thing where you'd be like, well, I don't want to really tell people that they should read Ted Kaczynski, but read Ted Kaczynski. Honestly, please do. Like,
I just sent you the link to the second episode of Truckcast, the first our first Dawnshire video.
great.
Again, it's
I'll share it out after the stream. Whenever. But just wanted to have it on deck. Thank you, so that I can share it out for people if they want to hear this. Again, not trying to I'm not promoting the things that Ted did, obviously. But
Didn't we talk about Englander? Didn't we?
we talked about him last
Ted
on the last Truckcast.
in the last.
You can't if you're trying to be realistic about modern political, honest. I mean, truly honest, but modern political theory. You inevitably come to Ted Kaczynski. I mean, that's just anyone who's being sincere and honest is going to have to come to Ted Kaczynski. That he had real points that were ignored in large part because he was a terrorist. Okay,
Well, and that goes back very much to the previous point we were making about human nature and kind of democracy. Democracy assumes that we are fundamentally rational and kind of can influence the.
precisely,
And
which we're not.
yeah, we just, our vote goes, towards the most capable people, or whatever.
I'd like to say something though. Is the thing that's really bad about democracy isn't that it assumes the individual is rational. Because if every individual is rational, you could just pick one to make the decisions for everyone, and it would be perfectly. It would work.
Mm.
However, the thing, you would basically get a monarchy. The thing about democracy that is so silly is democracy notices that every individual is not rational, but it somehow assumes that the majority of them all put together, working as a herd, will make rational decisions.
Now let me tell you this stuff. Like, this is what actually I find so insane about this, or and there's a lot of this that's very crazy to me and silly, but there has been an enormous body of research that has been conducted on organizational communication, and what that means is, how do organizations work? Mostly, it refers to businesses in terms of how that research functions. How that has manifested has shown time and time again that the more people you allow to have the ability to make decision within a company, the worse the company does. Because over and over again, it becomes bloated by bureaucracy. It becomes bloated by, I'm going to be real with everybody here. Mostly women who engage in inter-office politics and doing lame little high school level girls stuff, where they have a little beef with somebody else and they want to enact it in a larger scale. That does not work. When you put more people in charge and allow more people to have a vote in a company, the company suffers. It happens every time. It's the entire field of organizational communication. The entire field. Look, go to Google, type in organizational communication. Go to Google Scholar, type that in. Find out what you can read. Read literally any study from the field of organizational communication. What you will find is the bigger the group, the bigger the power, the stupider the decision. Every single time. That's a microcosm of how democracy works. It becomes a popularity contest. Popularity contests are not won by people who are actually good leaders. For the most part, they are won by idiots. And people.
Well, yes, I was just about to say is the secret to winning a popularity contest isn't being the most well-liked person; it's being the least hated person.
Going back to Dawnshire, though, this does relate very well to the ideas me and Lobster were talking about in terms of mass and scale. So, in modern democratic societies were.
Horror of mass and
Yeah, and
scale, I like to call it.
you were talking about your
Well said.
experiences, with in a slaughterhouse. How just the sheer number of animals being killed, just desensitize people
Yeah,
to
that was the
the
thing that disturbed me. The thing
yeah.
that disturbed me was not what was being done to the animals, or even so much how they're being treated, so much as just the mass and scale
Mm,
of it, and I guess the irreverence of it. I
Well, I mean,
felt
like,
like shouldn't there be perhaps because I am like an eighth Jewish, perhaps there's like perhaps I do have a genetic proclivity for kosher or something, but I felt like there should be a priest or somebody there blessing all
kind of,
these animals or
yeah.
something before they are killed, or maybe there ought to be a song sung or something, which is something that I talked to you about, Paladin, actually, was that
Yeah.
we ought to get musicians to write a song for every living creature and for
Mhm.
every plant and all that, because like one of the core tenets of Dawnshire we want to have would be like respect for nature. So like before you
mm,
slaughter a cow, before you cut down a tree,
Yeah.
before you
I
harvest grain, you ought to sing a song for it.
There's
mm.
something like I do agree with you actually on that. In that it's funny that the left who claims to care so much about nature wouldn't care about it in that
They're
kind of way.
Well,
In
their
our
yeah,
book,
their
they're
environment,
irreverent.
it's a
because
their movements are a
we have to
perversion, aren't they?
we have to consume meat. We have to consume resources from the earth. We have to live. It's part of we need to do it. Like we can't get around that. Okay, we can't atomize this stuff out of nothing, right? We
Mm,
need to harvest things from the earth. At the same time, I think that you're completely correct that it's at least thing we could do. And but this goes back to the importance of religion and the importance of faith. Because without faith, there's no reason to sing a song for the animal that you've killed in order to eat its flesh because you need to maintain sustenance.
Yeah,
I ate a lamb shank today, man, and I felt kind of bad about it because I know about how lamb is made. Okay, obviously.
yeah. Um,
it's not just it's not
it's been
eating the meat
years
in and of
since I ate
itself.
lamb.
It was delicious, but still.
Say years, yeah. It's been like I had a lamb taco once from a. It was a horrible, greasy little taco truck. I actually got colonitis afterwards. I was in the hospital for a day. I couldn't eat solid food for almost a week, but
Ooh.
it was the best taco that I ever had. It was kind of worth it.
The change.
Well, should we go back to the original? Was I going to
Yeah,
read this
sorry, go
paragraph out
ahead.
or something? I can't really remember.
Okay, well, how about can we at least get to the bottom of the? So did we already talk about freedoms and restrictions, liberty and did we already talk about that?
Well,
Sort of. I mean, I could
you,
look. I could talk
Lobster,
about that
Maybe
for
we.
hours. So
Okay,
you
yeah.
told me to get up this
So before
paragraph
we
up,
talk
or
more on
Lobster.
that, let's get to the bottom.
let's get to the bottom of it
Did you
by
find
staying
your
on top of
monologue
it.
on the two thrones? Did you find your
Yes.
monologue on the two thrones?
Oh, I didn't
Yeah.
Good.
even try to bring it
Yes.
up. But I
So,
I had was I supposed to have a monologue?
I think you both had different monologues you wanted to share. So, Englander, how about you get yours up first?
Sure.
Okay. Well, I don't even know how I would go about doing this. To be honest. What do you want me to do?
I thought you were just going to add it to the slides or something.
Oh yeah, that'll probably
Like
work.
take a
Yeah, yeah.
screenshot or something.
Mhm.
Okay, so while he's doing that, I guess I'll just look at the bottom thing. Aiden,
Oh,
with regards to the finance of Donshire, do you think that because there would have to be some way, no matter how small the state is, it still needs some way to accrue finances.
mm-hmm.
Be fair to call that tax, or do you think that we have to call that rent because like something about the fundamental nature of taxation versus rent, um, or yeah.
Hang on.
Like, would the this is something that I haven't thought about too much either. Um, would the um crap? Yeah, the steward. Would the steward of Donshire
Mm-hmm.
would he be like would he be like the owner of the land and all of his subjects would pay him rent, or would he be more like or would it be called a tax and would he be allowed to tax other things like whiskey or sugar or whatever?
actually sure. I don't know how you would do that. I don't think that. First of all, I think taxation is
Yeah.
bad, so I have an issue with that. Um, where I think you get the money in a monarchic system, right, is out of you getting some minor value out of the land that would be probably not a direct tax on people's income. That income tax is theft. Okay, income tax is
Uh,
theft. What I think the
oh,
best way you can do it is to charge a kind of tax on the right, basically to lend the land, which is horrifying. I know it sounds bad for libertarians, but the government needs some money to operate it. A little bit. I would like minimal amount of money to operate. By the way, minimal,
yeah.
minimal. I'm saying
Yeah, well, like the
1%.
thing is, you know, it's
1%
like the
I mean, what
what's
they
it
did
like
historically, by the way, historically,
yeah,
that's what it
well,
was.
like the Stewart isn't even supposed to have that much political power. He's supposed to have a small amount of political power and a lot of ceremonial roles, and then the majority of the political power would be split between the churches and the clans, the families themselves.
Well, I was going to mention here, which I haven't suggested before. What would you two think of tithes as a way of raising money for kind of churches
That might,
to
Well,
do
that's what
more
the churches
social?
do, and we
well,
Yeah.
don't.
that's fine for the churches. Tithes, that's fine. And by the way,
Mm.
I think of
Yeah, well,
all.
like a thing
Well,
that I'd like to say is
actually,
finish your
that's what
point,
I would
Aiden.
prefer. That's actually a good way to put it, real quick. It's a good way to put it. It's a tithe. If you want to give money to the government, you should be allowed to. It should be entirely voluntary. That's how I think
Okay,
it should work
okay,
the
yeah.
best way.
Maybe we
If you want
should
to pay
think
for
of
your
a
road,
different word. Like maybe it should be more like donations.
yeah, donation to the government.
Because I do think, you know, because even though I do want the government to be tied to all the various religious institutions of Donshire, I don't want it to be you know, like they should be two ropes that are tied in a knot, not two ropes that are spliced together. If that metaphor makes sense.
Well, one of the goals of Dawnshire would be just to simply the monarch would have so few powers that they wouldn't need this money in the first place. So the money would instead be going to these, external institutions to be promoting the social welfare of
Yeah, you know,
Dawnshire
like maybe
people.
like if there was one central highway in Donshire, that would be like the only road that the Stewart actually had any responsibility over. And then all the other roads would have to be made by like the individual clans. You know, like if you want to have a good road going through your clan territory, your clan has to pay for it themselves, and the crown is under no obligation to pay for it. So I guess what's it's like basically it's like the monarch would have control over the commons, whereas the clans and the individual families within those clans would have almost, you know, would have almost the same amount of control, you know, like virtually complete control over their own private property within Donshire. Like whenever, and I guess basically, you know, it's like, oh, would you like what's it like if you wanted to like fix the highway, the commons or whatever, if you wanted to build a new amphitheater for the commons, you would have to donate money, but you wouldn't be obligated to pay, I guess. That probably is like a good rational thing. Yeah, Aiden, I do agree with that idea. Okay, so Englander, would you like to read out the monologue or shall I?
You can if you want.
Okay, now before we do this, Aiden, was there something you wanted to say?
I just want to read my monologue.
Okay, well, I guess you can do that after. Crap, I
Okay.
forgot.
I'll read my monologue. I'll read my. I did find my monologue. That's what I was looking for. Was
Okay.
What? Yeah, you might as
I
well.
just forgot. I just forgot.
You can read it first if you want. I don't mind.
Was gonna read.
If you heard my horrible typing,
Okay.
that's what it was about. It was about me trying to find it.
Linder, you read your monologue, and then Aiden, you can read yours
Okay.
after him.
I will. It's very horrible. And mine's really long, by the way. But and I've read it before, but we'll get through it. Go ahead.
Right. Okay. So I'll just start by saying this is unfinished. But anyway, in Dawnshire in Dawnshire there exist two thrones, one for the steward, a representative of the land, whose role is to protect all men and women in the exercise of their traditions, customs, and faith passed down generations before. His people are rooted forever in its fields, mountains, pastures, and woodlands which their steward lords over and protects. No steward shall exist chiefly to rule, nor any farmer only to serve, for both will fight in defence of the homeland they were born into. The liberties enshrined in this Constitution, binded by the oaths taken in coronation, are of his greatest duties and responsibilities that shall be fulfilled to his passing. Yet far more mighty is the throne of Christ, where all from the lowly farmer to the steward serve their lives to defend. No power can usurp him, and no mortal condemn. His throne and his word are the cause that our people will lay down their lives to defend. There you go.
That is an awesome
Wonderfully well
Englander. If
said.
you updated this is even better than what was written down in the server.
Or like a celebrity.
That was
No, I haven't.
wonderfully
That's,
well
that's
said and succinct.
Thank you.
Short and succinct.
It's an
Now you
awesome
invited
that
me. Now you
this
invited
this
me.
is the preamble to the Constitution or something. This is
Yeah.
very nearly perfect Englander.
Thank
That
you.
was wonderful. That was extremely well said. And yeah,
Okay.
perfect. I'd say near perfect.
working
Well
now.
said.
Thank you.
However, I'm an autist,
Oh, my
so I
frames are-
can't make a statement that's that short and succinct.
Would you like to DM it to Englander so that he can get it on the screen?
Would you like to read it? Here, well, hang on a minute.
You can read it yourself, Aiden, but
Yeah, no, I'm gonna make
would
sure
you
that
like to put the
it's in a
words
Google
up on the
document.
screen so that the audience can read along?
Yeah,
A
make sure
cutscene
that
that
you can
involves
see
head
it. Hang
movement.
on.
I mean, it's probably it's easier for you to explain it to Paladin, so it's probably best if
Yeah,
you read
well,
it
I'll
out.
read it. I'll read it. But
Yeah.
here, I'll send it to you, King Lobster, because I don't know.
Mhm.
That's the Google document.
All right. I will take the document and I will DM it to Englander, and then he can get it on the
Mhm.
It
screen
sounded
so
like
the
a couple
audience can
thousand
read
words.
along.
But
I have no
it is
idea.
this is my hardcore statement on why I
Yes, I can
prefer
look around.
proposed
Dear.
monarchy. Yeah,
I'm
I know it's
seeing.
gonna be upsetting. It's gonna be upsetting.
Yeah.
I'm gonna read through it if it's all right.
Okay, go ahead.
How many words? Sorry.
No, don't. I mean, it's pretty long.
I need to turn
It's
the
only
sound
3
down so it's
pages.
loud.
Okay, for me that's very short. I guess it's 5 pages. Whatever. Okay. It is
On my
because
monitor, it's fine.
we value
but
freedom
in
and liberty
VR,
above all else that we find issues with the system of democracy. Freedom is not inherent to democracy. In fact, liberty is poorly suited by democracy, particularly direct democracies, due to the basic ill that plagues both, which is mob rule. Even in representative democracies, majority rule means that the desires of the minority will not be properly represented. As such, a democracy is only as liberal to the extent that the majority chooses to be liberal. Instead, it can often choose to be highly illiberal. And once illiberalism is the majority, there is no protection left for the minority. By the way, this is what's happening right now with the decision to try and, or the attempt to try and remove the filibusterns. In That's on purpose. That's to remove the any capacity for the minority to have any say. I continue. Only 51% of Germans elected Hitler into power, after all. That is but one of many examples of democracy giving way to authoritarianism. Similarly, the Cambodian people overthrew their monarchy to establish the Democratic Kampuchea, a communist one-party system with Pol Pot remaining as ruler, and as which he proceeded to engage in one of the most devastating genocides in human history, killing nearly one-fourth of the Cambodian population 4 years. Both in Germany and in Cambodia, then, monarchs were deposed by the people, who, with their newfound freedom, democratically elected authoritarian dictators without the alloy of a monarch for protection against tyranny of the mob. It is actually quite easier to find the one example wherein a monarch directly gave way to a dictator, which was the case in Mussolini, who did so with mass public pressure on the king. Again, pressure of the mob and mob rule. It is democracy, not monarchy, that has a long history of producing dictatorships under the banner of being the will of the people. Political philosophers, going back as far as Plato and Aristotle, understood that tyrants come into power by claiming to be one of the people, not part of the elite class. Instead, tyrants must be normal people who lead, not rule. The founding fathers and the French revolutionary philosophers were all well aware of the propensity of democracy to lead to mob rule. Jefferson described the mobs as supportive of government, as were sores to strength of the human body. And mob rule inevitably reduces individual liberty. In addition to liberty, nor is it that equality is well realized via democracy, as striving for pure equality comes from a place of envy rather than striving for equality under the law. De Tocqueville said, quote, "Equality is a slogan based on envy. It signifies in the heart of every Republican." End quote. Nobody is going to occupy a place. Oh, sorry, not end quote. Nobody's going to occupy a place higher than I. End quote. There on de Tocqueville. This has manifested itself throughout history, with tyranny arising on the slogans of equality, not of liberty nor of freedom, as all tyrants who arose in the Greek cities in the 4th and 3rd centuries reigned only by flattering whatever was worst in the mob, and violently suppressing whoever was superior by birth, wealth, or merit. Democracy seems to despise the exceptional and by rule of the mob, thereby rule of the mediocre, in the name of equality, again, not in the name of liberty, for which James Madison described that the law must protect property rights against the quote, spirit of democracy, end quote, due to its destructive nature. De Tocqueville also predicted that this concept, the spirit of democracy, would be used to rouse the public support for that which restricts their own freedoms, such as we can see in the claims of threats to our democracy being used to support authoritarian measures. Lenin and later Stalin both used the term democracy to give legitimacy to their own regimes. It is how, as Huey Long predicted, fascism would come to America under the name of democracy. Comparatively, to be a monarch is to be outside of all class struggles for equality. A ruler and leader both rule from above. It is a horizontal system, democracy. In a horizontal system, such as democracy, liberty is actually more likely to be restricted by the majority than it is in a vertical system. Because monarchs rule from above, they are held directly responsible for bad decisions, unlike rule by mob consensus. Horribly unpopular decisions are enacted by the populace, e.g., prohibition, which, when enacted by a monarch, such as was the case for that of Tsar Nicholas, by the way, tends to end at a gunpoint. The monarch, unlike the common man, is raised and educated from birth in the art of statecraft, as well as in morals, ethics, and economics, to most competently operate the state, which is his property, and protect the people, his wards. The common man thereby will always be a rank amateur beside the monarch. I ask you then, if you are on a boat in the middle of the ocean with two fellow passengers who, when you suffer from an acute appendicitis, which man do you choose to operate on you? A drunk doctor or a well-meaning poet? In this way, even the most mediocre monarch is preferable to an amateur. Let me ask a related question. Would you rather get a burger from McDonald's, a long established, profitable company run by a CEO whose goal is to maximize profits for him and his shareholders, or from a burger joint operated by the state of California? Not only would you prefer, probably, I would imagine, the experienced doctor, even if he is drunk, even if he's drunk to operate, so too would you probably prefer the burger from the business operated by the CEO rather than the one operated by members of a democratically elected government bureaucracy. Moreover, unlike a vertical system, a horizontal system is typified by diffusion of responsibility. Voters divest themselves of any responsibility in their anonymous vote, say a vote for Joe Biden or a vote for Hitler. Leaders who fail to accomplish anything can say they just need another term, which breeds indifference and corruption. No responsibility is required. The monarch is responsible to God and man. As monarchs both embody the state, e.g., I am Spain, and pass on responsibility to their descendants. For this reason, monarchs are not incentivized to gamble with a state that is both their property and an extension of themselves, being the state personified and the inheritance of their progeny. The monarch is not wont to draw power that which they did not inherit. Dictators, instead, after all, do not they're not dictators. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. After all, does not power corrupt and absolute power corrupt? Absolutely. Why would power corrupt if all one has ever known is power? If all you've ever known is power, why would it corrupt you? To suggest as much is environmental determinism. If this were true, then everyone born wealthy would be progressively more and more evil than those born poor. We know that's not the case. Instead, those drawn to power will be those who may be altruistic sometimes and capable of corruption, or those already corrupt, whom, however, would gain that power from an elected system. The honest common man who admits his fault and speaks only truth, or the bloviating liar who promises everything in exchange for your vote. Of course, it is the latter that draws the votes of the electorate to grant their deepest, darkest desire. The nature of
Um,
democracy requiring, yeah,
I don't
you
mean
can
to
interrupt
interrupt
my
you.
spiel. You can interrupt my
No,
spiel anytime.
it's a lovely spiel. I'm sorry for interrupting you. I need to go take care of something in my kitchen. Feel
No.
free to continue. Just I gotta drop out for a
Oh,
minute.
well, I'll continue my ding dong spiel.
Spacebar
Right.
stands it down.
Thank.
I'll
See you
just say
later.
it's
We're,
See you
we're,
soon.
we're, we're about half done.
I'll just say it's
The
very
nature of
interesting so
democracy.
far. So
The nature of democracy requiring men to compete for power, to usurp the property of others, to redistribute in ways they see fit, practically ensures that there can rarely, if ever, be any harmless or purely good democratic leader, while a monarch educated in ethics and morality whose property is the state, knows the value of his own property, the responsibility and care of which cannot easily be divested at the end of a term. Because responsibility is diffused, the most heinous actions can be justified. As Edmund Burke wrote, quote, in a democracy, the majority of citizens is capable of exercising the most cruel oppressions upon the minority, whenever strong divisions prevail on that kind of polity, as they often must, and that oppression of the minority will extend to far greater numbers and will be carried on with much greater fury than can almost ever be apprehended from the dominion of a single scepter. And such is the case that the most grievous atrocities of the last century have been enacted by leaders who arose from the power of the people and the mandate of the masses. You cast an anonymous vote, you wash your hands of the results of your actions. The result of this is that when it does not produce mistreatment directly, it is the necessity of elected politicians to appease the mob to maintain their position, which in the case of the current democracies has been an endless spending and incurring of massive debt to fund programs that people believe that they want, but not being educated in the art of statecraft themselves, would not know whether or not they need. Comparatively, monarchs will want to expand the wealth of the state, historically being forced to pay off at least some of their incurred debts, which does not happen in a democracy, by the way, while the debts of democracies only expand. Interest rates dropped under monarchs and rise under democracies. Monarchs typically spent about 2.5% of their GDP, their greatest expenditure, on the military, while modern democracies spend closer to 50% on social welfare programs, the will of the masses, hence contributing to the mass accumulation of debt to satiate their needs, untempered by the knowledge of politic and not needing ultimately to be answerable to the people. Another step in the diffusion of responsibility that, in the case of monarchy, lies solely on him alone. As I alluded to, the diffusion of responsibility present in democracies extends beyond the diffusion of the voter on their elected official onto the official back onto the people. Any campaign promise unfulfilled can always be fulfilled during the next term, after all. Democratic leaders are ultimately responsible to no one. Their failures are temporary. They can be voted out, they can retire, or promise to do better. The only form of responsibility for an elected leader is impeachment, which is only further removal of responsibility. All responsibility for grievous error instead lies exclusively in the hands of the king, who, if he abuses or disservices his subjects and the state, which is his property, and thereby disservices himself as a failure to protect it, is a failure. Elected leaders can continually run up national debt in appeasement of the coalition of its masses and reward them for capitulation to policies that ultimately only lead to national terminus. It often takes many years for the error of that appeasement to be made manifest, at which point no responsibility falls onto the elected leader. Meanwhile, the monarch is incentivized to make good but unpopular decisions, the correctness of which are often not understood until analyzed in retrospect from a historical lens. Both are rolls of the dice, but loaded in favor of the monarch whose responsibility is not diffused, although the benevolence and wisdom of his act are likely to be misunderstood by the mob at the current time, again, uneducated in statecraft. Ultimately, there is no perfect system of government. It is an oft repeated idiom that democracy is the worst form of government for all the others we have tried. A quote often misattributed or attributed to Winston Churchill. Of course, Churchill also posited, and this is a real quote to Churchill, quote, the best argument against democracy is a 5-minute conversation with the average voter. That is a real quote from Churchill. While democracy is a beautiful idea and an experiment, even its earliest proponents, even those to whom it is attributed in its modern form, the American founding fathers, were deeply afraid of the march towards tyranny that democracy would inevitably enact. For Americans, however, for whom the concept of democracy was nigh deific, to even question its virtue is akin to heresy. But I would not argue that democracy is the god of America, but instead is a poorly fashioned replacement for the intrinsic human need for paternalism. The monarch is a father as it towards infant children, not adult children, who cannot make and do not make good decisions for themselves. Monarchy is a familial system, both by heredity and by role. The king is the father to the people and the father towards his family, and therefore a permanent fixture throughout time. And while some fathers may harm their children, that is an aberration, it's not the rule. Unlike the mother who is comforting and coddling, and represented in the symbols of various democracies, Liberty, Colombia, Marion, Helvetia, the father is represented in the monarch. He is stern but protective of his flock and property alike. Dictatorships are not monarchies. They arise from a mandate of the people, not a mandate by God, and instead dictators take the form of a caricature of the monarch. To the American eye, orphaned from the tradition of paternalistic European monarchy, a dictator and monarch may appear identical. both being heads of state with seemingly limitless power. However, this is not so. Dictators lack the paternal interrelationship with the state and the country, that as physically manifest in the form of the monarch, who is the father to the children of the state, his wards. It is a lack of a paternalistic figure that drives the urge for a dictator to replace the missing father, which democracies who, like teenagers, have rebelled against, and over time, lacking the guidance of the father of the monarch, seek it out in a new form of a new father to replace their lost patriarch. The mob behaves like children in its calls for what it wants, but not what it needs. When absent the father, it chooses a mother, who provides these things endlessly in supplication. However, the needs of the father prevail, and out of this need consistently rises a paltry replacement with no love nor relationship to these adopted children of the state. A country without a monarch,
I have something to
single
say
mother house.
about
May I finish my last line? Because
about
it's a
okay.
damaging one. It's a devastating one. A country without a monarch is a single mother household living in fear of the abusive stepfather she will inevitably court. Continue. I got one more paragraph, then we're done. Sorry, I said it was a rant. I said it was a fucking rant.
Right. I was just those are all brilliant points, and I gotta say, with the abusive stepfather, that was really well alluded to. You know, because when you're talking about dictators in that comparison, all I could think about was gangsters. You know, because like in the hood with all these single parent households, that's what you get a lot. Is the boys when they get to the teenage years, fed up with the coddling mother, they look for something patriarchal, and the nearest place they can find that is the gangster.
Again, if you look at history, it's Colombia, it's Liberty, Colombia, Berrien, Javier.
Where continue.
It's always the feminine. It's always the feminine.
Continue with the monologue. Continue with this beautiful monologue.
It's almost over. For most Americans, the idea of monarchy is not just preposterous, it is antithetical to the very principles upon which the nation was founded, and thus to even suggest value in a monarchic system seems a joke. Yet this perspective is distinctly Americentric and disconnected from the history of the old world both physically and culturally. Not only are monarchies still extant, not suffering under the thumb of some wicked Prince John, awaiting to be liberated by an American Robin Hood, waving the banner of the Democratic Republic, Robin Hood himself being a monarchist and loyal to Richard Lionheart, the three wealthiest countries by GDP are all currently constitutional monarchies: Liechtenstein, Luxembourg, and Monaco. Despite the fact that the founders themselves were highly skeptical of democracies, when being a democratic citizen is not just all one knows personally, but all of one's national history, it's difficult to see things from any other perspective. However, time gives perspectives to all things. Similarly, similarly to how it may be absurdist for someone to hear, like myself, that advocates to advocate the belief that antiquated monarchism in the New World is realistic, with the very word evoking imagery of cartoon villains and visions of decadence of Marie Antoinette, so too would it be seen as absurdist to raise the topic of a return to a monarchic system with a Roman living during the Pax Romana of 80 AD. Even though at the time, Rome had known many systems of government, because Americans have only known our one system of government, we struggle to envision anything outside of that which is not also American, and thereby anathema to the traits that we associate with Americanism, namely freedom and liberty. Yet, as I have explicated, neither freedom nor liberty are intrinsically linked to democracy. Instead, liberty, for all it is stifled under the boot of the majority rule, going back to Rome, if we were to skip ahead 200 years and speak to a descendant of that aforementioned Roman in 280 AD, he would scoff at the idea of a Roman monarchy and insist his state is a republic. After all, they have a senate, although they do have an imperator, which means they do have an imperator, which means a general, and a princeps, which means first man. It doesn't mean prince. It just sounds like it, doesn't mean it. The fact that these words sound like emperor and prince are merely coincidences of language. The idea that monarchy could take hold in Rome would be as ridiculous to him as it would be to his ancestor, just as it is in America, or any other modern democratic state for that matter. Could return to monarchy might seem equally laughable. That would be, of course, until we revisit Rome, that Roman citizen, just a few years later, after Diocletian enacts a series of reforms which deprive the Senate of all of its power over the emperor, and then ruled as a near absolute monarch. As such, just because one's perspective, be it from a certain point in time or place of origin, may portray systems as fixed, the perspectives may capture a wider picture. The idea that monarchies are antiquated or that monarchs are all tyrants are simply products of a deeply Americentric worldview, and given the trajectory of so many other democracies over the course of history, that my focus may not just be limited, but dangerous, I would say disastrous, in its lack of scope. It's easy to laugh at the past until it repeats itself in the most monstrous way. one can look at the totality of human history and pick out the worst examples of monarchs that broadening their search to see the whole image, which is that for liberty, monarchy is preferable to democracy. And while occasionally, yes, monarchy may lead to an individual tyrant who can be deposed, democracy leads to tyranny inevitably in the form of dictatorships, not just led by a man who, due to their nature and station, is mostly immoral and a liar, who cares for nothing but power, but who is armed by the masses who elected him and will follow him into destruction. And I end my spiel, a very good quote from Riverol, which is that the absolute ruler may be a Nero, but he is sometimes a Titus or Marcus Aurelius. People is often a Nero and never a Marcus Aurelius. There's my statement. Yes, you wanted to do a speech. There's my speech. It was like 10 times longer than yours. Sorry.
No,
no problem.
That is actually quite brilliant. It is really, I would say. You said that what's it? There's so much information packed in there. I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised by its length.
Gotta be kind of.
Yeah.
That's
I would
concise
say
for me,
if
Incredibly well
yeah,
written, by the way.
If Englander, yeah. I would say that if Englander's Two Thrones is the preamble to the Constitution,
You didn't play
that 5-page statement of yours, Aiden, was something more like the Declaration of Independence.
I tried my best. Well, I tried.
It was very good.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it.
That I would edit.
Well, there's stuff to be edited. I think that, however,
Monopoly is also on
I
sale for
I
like
tried
$5.
my best. I tried my best to say things that I think are really,
yeah,
really
right,
important
yeah.
for everybody to understand. But where we have problems with democracy, that's all it is. I'm not advocating
Yeah.
for communism. Obviously, I'm advocating for monarchy, and here's why. And I think that's the most succinct. I look. I don't often. I don't often suck my own dick. But I think I wrote a pretty good fucking document there.
Yes,
The
you
best thing
did. It
you've
was
ever written.
brilliant.
Well,
It was,
Absolutely
yeah.
brilliant.
Don't suck me off. That's not good. Don't do that.
My only criticism is like, yeah, it is maybe like a little bit too long, but I gotta say, I am not. Yeah, I am not smart enough to edit it in any way. You'd have to find somebody with a bigger brain than me.
It has
to edit.
It has what I would call flow. It kind of just leads
I'm
onto
gonna
the,
upset your audience, anyone who's watching or listening to my horrible fucking long ass spiel.
If you
But
want to see a
that's,
and-
fractal, a fractal bubble,
And it had a very good, flow.
Yeah, let's just do a fractal.
I'm not a politician. I'm a social scientist. If
I
I
like
was
this one
going
because it
to
has
be a
destructible
politician,
strength.
this would be my magnum anus. Excuse me, opus.
Why is it on our monitor?
Joking.
Yeah.
So could I link this to Dawnshire for a second?
I posted it somewhere. I'll give it to you, King Lobster. If you'd like to, if anyone would like to read this, this is my magnum opus. Like,
Yeah, we were
I'm not saying
we were
this is
reading
best
along.
ever, right, but this is my silly proposal.
So, Englander, would you like to get the list back up?
Yes. Well, I was also going to say it's linked quite well with Dawnshire and our decision to change the title from a king to a steward, but to make it more palatable to an American audience.
Alright,
But the thing is how
The problem's always Americans. Like,
Yeah.
they stink. They can't. They get very upset by the word king. They get upset
Yeah.
because they get brought back to the idea of. And by the way, like, if you're not aware, as I would imagine you would, well, you might not be, but King George was not the horrible tyrant he is portrayed as in the American mythos, right? He's portrayed as being this terrible,
Are you
terrible.
looking at
What did he do? He overcharged for tea.
It was literally, well, not just tea, but yeah, it was literally just taxes. It was
mostly
just
tea.
literally, oh, sugar was too
Taxation.
expensive, tea was too
Sugar and tea.
expensive. Well, not just that, paper even. There was the stamp tax, which was on like playing
actually,
cards,
I'm being a little bit
envelopes.
silly. I'm
pretty sure the stamp tax was actually the main thing. Tea was just an
That's how it
easier
gets,
symbol
yeah.
to attack.
But either way, it was all taxation.
Yeah.
Because taxation without representation was the issue. Now that being said,
Yeah, and that just sort of exploded.
But it never worked.
King George actually allowed Americans greater capacity to control their own government under
You gotta
his
get
rule.
a good
Well,
I'm
it's-
aware of that. He did.
launch.
well, let's not forget during Charles I's personal rule, he implemented what's called ship money, and this was a huge problem amongst sort of parliamentarians and MPs, and kind of was one of the leading factors to the English Civil War. And then during the Civil War, that same Civil War, what Parliament did is they implemented a similar system to ship money, and just actually
Very
it made it
true.
even worse.
Precisely.
Again, completely unsurprised. So yeah, I do actually have to go. I'm pretty sure the oven's finished preheating. I need to go take care of some stuff in my kitchen again.
Go take
Feel
care of
free
your
to talk
stuff.
among yourselves. Maybe
Mhm.
Englander, if you get the list back up.
Oh yeah.
Are we
Mhm.
And
done? Are
maybe
we
maybe
gonna
talk
get
about
going?
maybe pick
I'm
out
really
one of
sorry.
those topics.
I'm really sorry that I spent 20 minutes or whatever it took me to read through my stupid ass script. But
It's
I
fine. It was a beautiful script.
It was. Yeah.
I think I'd like to make a separate video of just you reading that in like a slightly dramatic way for the Dawnshire YouTube channel.
I'll spoon read it because he'll read it in a much better way than I can. This
Yeah.
is my manifesto.
I have to admit, he
Let me
has a
pull it up.
slightly more.
Well, Spoon has a unique. He's got a great deep voice. He's got a mix of a South African accent and a British accent. So like he's very
Yeah,
good
yeah.
at it.
Well, it's a posh British accent too.
Yes, he's very posh. So he makes everything sound more legitimate.
Yeah, but with just like a hint of like South African, slightly cowboy sounding.
You can hear like we pronounce like F. Yeah, like you can hear the South African comes into it.
Africa.
Africa.
Anyways, yeah, I'm gonna go take care of a big old pork roast, and y'all just talk about one of these topics on the list.
Well, go ahead. Sorry, I'm so sorry for derailing for like 20 minutes to read my script.
No, it was an awesome tangent. I could not be more pleased with a conversation getting derailed.
Well, it's only because I do want people to
Why would I have
this,
$30
my
skiing
silly
game?
manifesto, which is only 5
I
pages
already
long.
own
It's not a long,
whiskey
it's
and
not a long
snowboard for
document.
the
Really,
Nintendo
big
Wii
scheme of things.
without
It's got a lot of data in it. It's got real historical citations. It's got a lot of references to actual historical figures. Not just me just making shit up. I am reading off of what has happened throughout history. And I know that it sounds very pretentious and silly, but the reality is monarchy has been a better system to preserve liberty than democracy has been. And I truly believe that. And that's if I want to preserve human liberty, that's why I'm a monarch.
Well, you managed to put that all in within something that's at least shorter than the the Unabomber manifesto. So it's not 35,000 words. So well done there. I think the main
I'm a fan of Uncle Ted, but I can't say that stuff easily in public without people getting upset. But I agree with a lot of what Uncle Ted said.
Yeah, well,
my counter proposal, right?
Well, a big takeaway I got from your, I guess, manifesto is it's like almost how do we destroy the American idea? Almost sort of around democracy.
It's a uniquely American idea, and I don't know how we. I wanted to say destroy it. That sounds violent.
Yeah.
It will inherently have to be violent because any revolution is violent inherently. I would prefer if it's not. I'm a pacifist, by the way.
But that's not going to happen, is it? You're not going to peacefully overthrow the government or something, are you?
Unfortunately, no. I wish. It's my Pepsi. It's Pepsi Max. If you can hear it, sorry. But unfortunately, no. It's probably not going to happen that way. So I don't know what we do to overthrow the government in a peaceful manner. I'd like to. How we do it.
Well.
And by the way, for me, if people are not aware, and I think they are, based on what I said, but it might not be clear. When I call myself an anarcho-monarch, I mean that anarchist part. People would have maximal individual liberty.
Yeah.
It's very important.
Well, I would. I mean, after our conversation we had earlier, I would. Yeah.
Needs to be killed. Okay. Right.
I mean,
the monarch needs to be killed. We have no capacity to do that under democracy, as I think in my giant spiel kind of clear, which is that under a democracy we have almost no capacity to actually make somebody pay for their bad actions.
Why?
You have almost no
I
capacity.
told you that. There's 0 way.
Oh, I am back.
Hello. Sorry, your roommate is upset about something, I guess. But there's almost no ability within a democratic
my
system.
brother is playing video games again, so it is.
It's your brother. I wasn't sure who it was, but
it's just us.
They're all cool. We're all cool.
Right now.
If you watch the first Trotcast, you'll also hear a lot from his brother as well. It's quite funny.
You're fine. You're all fine.
And in the other truck casts, also, it's like my younger siblings playing in the background a little bit, and also my sister playing piano.
Mm.
I'm the eldest of
Just to be
six
clear,
children.
that Riverroll quote is what it's most. That's the best quote. I quote it all the time, which I think we're probably gonna get really sick of. That's that quote. The absolute ruler may be a Nero, but he is sometimes a Titus or Marcus Aurelius. People is often a Nero and never a Marcus Aurelius. And by the way, Marcus Aurelius, let's get really clear, not a perfect leader either. Of course he's not. During his time, yes. But then he elects his son Commodus to become the next emperor of Rome, which is a real bad move because Commodus was a shit show. I'm not saying that this shit is perfect. I think I made that kind of clear, but if people aren't aware, monarchy is not a perfect system.
Challenge. They didn't say.
Yeah, we're
There's
not
no,
trying to find a perfect system. We're just
it
trying to
can't
find
exist.
We
something
never
that
will, no.
sucks less than everything else.
Yeah. Well, on your point of
Precisely.
on your point that you made of overthrowing the government or whatever, I think me and Lobster, we're not trying to go for that. We're
Yeah,
trying to
sorry.
sort of
I'm so used to arguing with people who love democracy. Um, so
we're just trying to sort of I guess wait until it's collapsed basically and build something in the meantime. I guess is the main thing that we're going
what are we
for.
gonna do? I don't actually understand like how your Dawnshire. This is a proposed system
It's
of
an
society.
it's
Almost
entirely
like
theoretical at the
almost
moment,
like
but
a commune.
yeah,
Okay.
Almost like a commune. We just want to buy like 1,000 acres or something somewhere,
Well,
and then
may
just get a couple of hundred people living and working on it
may
independently and self-sufficiently.
may I critique your system a little bit?
go
It's been
ahead.
tried before. Unfortunately, like libertarians have tried to do that before. The problem is that that's why. And this, by the way, I agree.
Well,
I would
that's
love
why
it.
we don't want it to be an anarchist
Yeah, the problem is
federation.
that there's libertarians in it.
But you need a monarch, someone who's in charge
Yes,
of.
and that's why we're making it the monarchy.
Hell yeah. Okay, I know. Well, great,
Sorry,
great.
It,
Because
yeah,
when I
sorry.
you're
was
gonna need a
saying the
monarch.
commune bit, I was just saying it would vaguely resemble a commune in the
Mm,
sense that it would be like it would be a private property within a larger state that would be probably the United States, but we've also been looking at Eastern Russia because
yeah.
well they're practically giving away land for free in that country. They
Yeah. Well,
desperately need.
take over. What's that island that's off the coast of Russia?
Is it one of the ones near Alaska?
There's a big. Yeah, it's up north. It's what's that big island?
It's like how big is it? Is it like
It's
thousands of
pretty big.
miles or
It's
something, and it
giant.
has a similar climate to England?
Really?
I don't know actually what the
No, I wouldn't.
climate
I
is like,
wouldn't.
but let's look.
Surely not.
I've heard it. It's supposed to have well, because it is far north, yes, but it
Yeah.
gets warm currents up out of the ocean, because it's
Well,
on the coast.
we'll get that same stuff here.
Supposedly, it's got a similar
Off.
climate
It's in
to
the Sea of
Scotland.
Oslos. Yeah. Yeah. Here it is. Here it is. What's this called? Um, Sac
Like yeah, where it
Sac
does snow a bit, but
Sakhalin.
the yeah,
I don't know if I pronounced that right. Sak Sakhalin. That's the island that's off the coast of Russia. That's right above Japan.
oh yeah,
Oh,
is that
there.
one that
Yeah.
they're like trying to give away? Like nobody lives there.
Nobody lives there. That's the thing. But it's this island that's off islands off the coast of Russia that is right above. Um, so it's not the Honshu. How do you call it? Hokkaido.
Hokkaido. Oh yeah. The Eskimo island in Japan.
Yeah, Sakalisk.
I call it
Sakhalin.
that because they have sled dogs. I call
Well,
it
but
Eskimo Island because they have sled
Sapporo
dogs.
is not that Hokkaido is not that bad. Like well, Sapporo is
I
in
used to live
Hokkaido.
in Alaska. I've lived in places much colder than Hokkaido. Don't worry.
Yeah, sure. But for real though, like it's this island that nobody lives on for the most part. It's in the
I
Sea of
wonder, would it
Oktos.
be too cold? I wonder if we got a bunch of horses, like if we got a bunch of Mustang out of Canada and a bunch
We'll
of
just take this
Icelandic
island.
horses, could we?
Let's take this island
Yeah,
and make a
could we
monarchy
get like
there.
some wild horses on this island?
For
Well, there
sure.
we go. I think that's the
It's
location
gonna be
sorted
like
out then.
I think at some point it's only like 20 miles off the coast of
Okay,
Russia.
yeah.
So you're
So
gonna
our plan is either this island or Wyoming.
Yeah, pretty much.
well, I
Okay.
mean, like it's fine, but like that's probably. By the way, it's a massive island. The island I think is basically the entire landmass of Japan or close to it.
Ooh. Ooh. So what would we?
It's a
Okay,
big
so yeah.
land.
Dawnshire. Well, and the thing is, it is in the far east of Russia. So would we want to call this something like well, I guess we already know. Oh my gosh, that works because we have Dawn in the name. My
Yeah, there you go.
gosh. Because it's off. It's far east of Russia, It literally is Dawn Shire, Dawn Land. My gosh.
One sec.
Englander, it appears that we have some dead air. Would you like to fill it
Yes.
somehow? Shall we just go on about base 12 math?
We should. Sorry, my fiance came in and tell me about how good his stew smells because I'm sure.
I guess we can go into
What
the
kind of stew is it? What are you having? Beef or
Beef.
pork or what?
Beef. It's
Oh,
nice.
ye beef. Um, all right.
Yes. So
Okay, so let's just.
base 12
We've
then.
had a lovely,
Let's go
delightful
some.
conversation.
You've had to listen to my horrifying script.
Let's have some
Don't worry,
rank.
it was
Oh,
awesome.
it's not a script. It's at that point it's a manifesto. I don't mean to be
It's an
like.
awesome manifesto. That will be engraved in a stone monument in Dawnshire if we ever manage to get that island
I would
Russia,
love
from Russia.
get this Russian island. And by the way, go to Google Maps and look at it. Look at how huge this island is that basically nobody lives on.
Okay. What did you say? Type out
It's
the
Sakhalin.
name and DM me the
It's
name.
Sakhalin. Sakhalin. I'll just post it to you. It's Sak
Mhm.
SAK.
Was that the island that sort of yo-yoed between Russia and Japan for?
It's right above Japan. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
like nobody lives there. But there's this giant island that's off the coast of Russia that nobody lives on for the most part. I mean, people do, like, not get that confused. There are people who live here, but not a lot. It's right above Hokkaido. And sorry for my pronunciation. I am weirdo weeb. Speak Japanese, so I'm sorry about my.
Oh yeah. I see it. Yeah, it's very
It's
close to
giant,
Russia, very close to
but it's
Japan as well.
giant.
I do. Yeah.
I will pull up a
It
picture of
is
this
something.
place
Oh
post
my gosh!
recording.
And look at these beautiful. There's like these mountains right by the sea. It looks like New Zealand.
Yeah, because it's just north of New Zealand. That's why. Well, it's
Well, it's
north
probably
and to the
part of the
east.
same mountain range, isn't it? The Ring of Fire.
In terms of the longitudinal history of the of the world development, yeah, probably it's part of the same eruption that made it that
Yeah.
way.
I used to live in Alaska, and like that's one of those sort of things. It's one of the few interesting things is Alaska has several active volcanoes, and
Yeah,
because it's part of the Ring of Fire.
I actually don't think that it
Uh,
has a lot of volcanic activity, though. Interestingly, I don't think it does.
yeah.
I could be wrong.
Well,
I
you're
don't
right.
know.
No, because I think actually looking at it now, it does seem to be slightly outside the Ring of Fire. It probably
Yeah,
gets earthquakes, but I'd imagine not volcanoes.
not like okay. So mainland Japan, which is called a Honshu, right? Nihongo de
Honshu.
Honshu.
Yeah.
Mainland Japan called Honshu. Hokkaido, which is the North Island.
Got
They don't get as many earthquakes as mainland Japan does. And in the Kyushu, which is the islands that are south of Japan, they get earthquakes as well, but not so much in
Yeah, okay,
Hokkaido.
so yeah, Englander has left us. He
Oh
won't
no.
be back for another minute or two. So keep talking. We need to fill the dead air.
Well, I'm not. Is this dead air? I don't know. I'm just
No,
saying, like, if you want, if you
I
want,
don't talk very much, so please carry on.
if you want a place to build a monarchist
Civilization.
utopia, you might want to look at that island off the coast of Russia. Because by the way, I think
Apparently,
Russians,
it's its own oblast, and
yeah,
can't really see any cities. It seems like they've got like it seems like
yeah,
it's just a couple of national parks, just a couple of
there's almost nothing on
and
this
like
island.
one road. Yeah,
Yeah,
no, I can see. I'm zooming in now. It seems like there's like one,
there's
two,
nothing on this island. That's why I brought it up. It's a giant island
three,
that's like the base of Japan, and then there's like nothing on it.
four.
It's a little bit smaller than Japan, but it's a giant island where there's like nothing on it. You have to put this shit on some
Yeah,
kind of
there's like
random.
a couple of villages and a bunch of national parks.
Yep, that's what it is. Brought it up for a reason.
Yeah. Oh gosh, I can just imagine, and it seems pretty grassy too. Can you imagine how like some cold hardy horses, like some Canadian Mustang or something, would do on this?
Yeah, exactly. Like this is a legitimate plan. If you wanted to do it, it's bigger than Cuba. It's better
Yeah.
than Puerto Rico, for sure.
Although I wonder what the wildlife laws are like in Russia. I wonder if they would let us.
They're not allowed us to do anything, by the way. But I was saying,
Well,
like,
they
if you want to
probably will, but
establish,
I mean, like, yeah,
if you want to establish an alternative government, an anarchist, monarchist system, whatever it is, that would be the place that I would be looking at. Is this precise island? I know that that sounds very
yeah.
silly because it is, but you
I
got a
feel like,
real
and you
ass
know
thing
what?
there.
Yeah, and it
Nobody
occurs to
wants
me,
that goddamn island. It's cold. It
oh gosh,
sucks. By the way, it's really close to
I used to live in
Alaska.
Fairbanks. I
It
used to
stinks.
live in Fairbanks. Don't worry, I'm familiar with northern cold. The thing is, though, it is an island. It's surrounded by the ocean, so it's probably less cold than where I spent, where I lived from the time I was 8 to the time I was 12.
Yeah, actually, islands are better, even though they get winds from the sea. Like here in Guernsey, at least, even though we are the southernmost point in
Yeah, like I imagine it probably doesn't
New
get colder
Jersey.
than about -30 here.
We don't get. I have no idea what's like
No, no,
in
I don't know.
Stockholm
I don't know
or
Guernsey. No, no,
whatever.
no. I was talking about the island,
Yeah, I don't know how cold it
this
gets in
other island,
Sakhalin or Sakhalin.
Sakhalin. Yeah.
I'm probably
Okay,
pronouncing
so
it
it
incorrect.
seems like that. Yeah, it seems like they've got one airport. It doesn't seem to be international though. It's just
It's it,
USS
it
or
it's
UUS.
a Russian, I think, mostly airport. Um,
And
despite the
they've
fact
got one
despite the fact
airport
that
that's not even international.
despite the fact that it's 50 miles from the north coast of Hokkaido. And again, I'm sorry, like people could like get weird about that, the fact that I pronounce Japanese words correctly. Like I know people are like, "Oh,
Pronounce
you
them
fucking
very
weed."
well. Yeah.
I speak Japanese, so like, yeah,
Hokkaido. I know. You told me about it last night.
yeah. So not intentional. I'm not trying to be rude. I'm not trying to be weird. I just speak this fucking language, so whatever.
Hokkaido.
Hokkaido, the capital of which, if you want to call it, is the capital of Sapporo. But
Sapporo.
it's right there. It's very close to like natural, uh, very important economic centers. Yet nobody uses this island, which is massive. It is shaped like a fish.
Yeah.
Interestingly, I'm sorry.
Fish. I love
I keep looking
fish.
at I keep looking at this fucking
I
island.
love
Um,
fish.
if you
So
wanted
it
to set up
appears that yeah.
if you want to set up an anarchist utopia, which can exist. No, utopia does not exist within human society. Cannot exist. But I would say that's the island to do it on. If the because
Yes.
The Russians don't care about this island, by the way. There you go.
Well, like the thing is, like probably all we'd have to do is just like make some kind of tacit like send rings or something. It's like, oh yes, it's like a show of our allegiance. Here's like a nice little bit of jewelry from the what's he's called? I made up
This
this
big,
title, the
yeah,
steward. Yeah, it's
yeah,
just like
yeah. The
here's a
steward.
ring from the steward as like a show of his loyalty or something. That would
It,
be
it,
all they
it,
really want, wouldn't
I
it?
would imagine if Elon Musk wanted to buy this island, he could definitely buy it. Just saying, like Russians don't care about this. It's useless
Yeah.
land to them. They don't do anything with it. Like as you've said, there's one road that goes through it, and there's like one town.
Well,
Maybe
there's one large town in the south near
yeah,
Japan. That's
near
where
Japan.
their
Yeah.
only airport is,
Yes.
and it's connected to another smaller town that has a ferry. It's the only ferry in between this island and the mainland.
I'm just saying, if someone wanted to buy this island off the Russians and do whatever they wanted with it, now under the people's permission, obviously, that would be the place to do it.
Yeah.
I hate that I have to keep saying that, but like that's a thing. It's a giant
Yeah.
island. You could totally do
Yeah.
a government there. That won't happen ever. This is complete um speculation. It will never happen.
And no,
It's
if
bigger than
Donshire
Florida,
ever
by the
does
way.
come to exist, yeah. If Donshire ever does come to exist, it'll probably just be like literally like a big commune type thing in Wyoming.
Hmm.
But you know what? It is nice to keep this in mind because, like, you know what it could be. It occurs to me. It might be that, like, yeah, we start off in Wyoming or whatever, but then like after, well, I guess then after we have like some street cred, so to speak, once we're sure that everything works
Hmm.
and we're finished with the experimental phase, then maybe we could have some kind of
Yeah.
great migration or whatever and
The
make this stuff
Empire of
great.
Dawnshire.
Oh,
Well,
God.
I mean, like we're all doing experimental stuff here. This is all
Yeah,
experimental.
yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
I'm
Yeah.
saying like there's been some stuff where like anarchists have bought islands and then like tried little anarchist experiments that have not worked, by the way. But
yeah.
if you
So
want
we
to do
need
a
to keep all that
grand
in mind and make sure that we
grand
don't
anarchist,
follow the same mistakes.
there you go. There's
Make
your
sure we
island to
don't.
buy. Buy it off the
Yeah.
Soviets. They don't want it. They clearly don't care about it. It probably is really cold and shitty there. To be fair, it's near
Yeah.
Siberia, so be
I
aware.
know, but I used to, well, actually, no, Siberia, technically speaking, the Siberian territory is in the middle of Russia.
Hmm.
It's east of civilization, but it's also far west of the majority of that country.
Yeah, Yakutsk, which is a capital, I think, of
The,
Siberia.
yeah. Where
It,
Sakhalin
far,
is
it's far
Sakhalin
northern.
is much closer to Kenai.
Yeah,
Kenai
yeah.
is the part of Russia that it's near.
It's very close to China, but again, like again, interesting kind of proposal. I'm not saying what you're gonna do, what anyone should do, but if somebody
I
gave a
like how
shit,
close it is to Japan because I'm a fucking weeb, so I would love to be.
私はもうウィーブですね。ウィーブでしょ。
I would love to be to it will be yeah I would love to be this close to Japan and Korea.
Although, yeah. And you're near Korea,
Also,
yeah. You're
it
sort of.
occurs to me is like it is within invasion distance of China as well. So
Well,
yeah,
okay, I'm not saying it's a
speaking
I'm
of
not saying it's perfect. I'm just saying nobody wants this
well, no.
land.
I was more joking that we could invade China was my
No, 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 no. Now,
we could
again,
yeah
this island is bigger than the Philippines.
yeah.
Nobody wants it. And it might be in part because I don't know how bad the weather is there. I imagine it's kind of shit.
Well,
But the Scandinavian
Russia
countries are
is
doing
hungry
okay.
for farmers, so yeah. Oh yeah, well the thing is, I used to live in Alaska, so it's like
Hmm.
I am familiar with potatoes and all that.
Hmm.
It's like I know about Arctic produce.
It's further south.
Um,
It's just south of some part of Anchorage. So
Anchorage. Well, if it's south of Anchorage, it's probably fine. Gosh, I sound so arrogant saying this, don't I? But Anchorage is kind of nothing.
well, my
Like
son lives in
Anchorage
Anchorage.
are city people. They're no, I don't
Oh,
need
by son I
the
mean like
story of your
I
Alaskan
adopted
son.
an
I
Alaskan
know he's not. I know.
I adopted an Alaskan boy. He was
You
like
told me this
he was
story. This is
yeah,
the
yeah,
third
did.
time you're telling me this story.
Sorry. Well, now I'm
Don't worry,
no,
Englander
I don't.
hasn't heard it.
Well, yeah,
Go on
exactly.
then.
Like
Yeah.
no one else has heard this. So I adopted an Alaskan child. By that I mean he was like he was like 19, and I love this person a whole bunch. I consider him my son. He calls me mom. By the way, it's very I guess kind of weird, but it's
I want to make jokes
don't
about.
don't be weird about it. I don't think it's weird. The fact that I'm just like hey like yo it's fine. You're my
I want to
son.
make jokes with the
Mm,
Dimitrescu thing,
Dimitrescu?
but I
Yeah,
don't.
no, I'm not that kind of mommy.
With
Not
the
that kind of
dominant.
mommy. Not that kind of
I
mommy.
know you're not. I know you're not. But I wanted to joke about it, but I was afraid how you'd react.
Oh, I don't know. I don't give a shit. Like you can say anything you want about me, but really, well, really, I don't know what you'd have to say for me to get actually upset. Like I've dealt with so much shit. There really is
Oof.
yeah. I have this person that I met on fucking Steam 20 years
This
ago. Not
TF2,
20.
wasn't it?
Yeah, 15 years ago. And when he was a child, well, he was like 17 or 18, and we were a little bit older than him. We were all like 21, 22 at the time. And we're like, okay, you're our son now. We have adopted you. So I have this Alaskan, and to be clear, he's still really close to me. Like we're like, anytime he has a problem, like talk to me, my son. He has children now, by the way. Like this is an adult person, but I'm like, you're my Alaskan son.
The
uh,
Midnight Sun, bum bum bum.
Here's my midnight sun. Yeah. Oh, perfect. I'll call him that next time. By the way, it'll be really funny.
Yeah. Well, because in Alaska, well, I don't know about actually, not so much in Anchorage because it's a bit too far south,
Hmm.
but like where I lived in Fairbanks during summer,
Oh, you did it in
literally the
Fairbanks.
sun never
Holy shit, dude.
sets.
No, it doesn't. Doesn't. Not in the summer. Nay.
Well, in Anchorage, I think it does. It like for like an hour, the sun properly sets in
Well,
Anchorage, even during the hottest part of summer. But in Fairbanks, it never would.
no. No,
Of
never.
course,
Well,
the funny thing about Fairbanks is that it's colder in the winter than Anchorage is, but it's also much hotter in the summer.
well, some weird shit about that. Kind of. This is unrelated, I guess. We're on like we're off. We're completely off the fucking chart. But I would say that like people say that the UK is so goddamn cold, and yeah, it is. But like here, I would say
It also
either
never
I've
snows in the winter.
it has
Well,
never
in
snowed.
England,
It has
it
not
very,
snowed in
very,
crazy
very
fucking
rarely
years.
snows here.
Yeah, it hasn't.
yeah.
It has
Except for
not
like
snowed.
Scotland, like what's it like? Scotland is
Yeah.
so exceptional by UK standards. It's called Snowdonia for a reason.
Yeah, which is bizarre though when you look at the United States and where they get snow, because you get snow all over the place,
It's
which is
because you
far
guys
further
get the
south.
Atlantic Current.
But
No,
yeah,
because
exactly,
like
exactly.
London is on the level with Hudson Bay, which has polar bears.
Yeah,
But
but
London gets those warm Atlantic currents. It's the same thing that makes Cuba warm.
the thing
You get Cuba
that's
water.
bizarre. It's so bizarre. People like think when I say Iceland, now we know why it's called Iceland. It was a meme. It was a literal fucking historical meme called Iceland, Iceland.
Greenland, Greenland, and Iceland,
Yeah,
Iceland.
Yeah.
Although at the time, Greenland actually was green when they found it. It was much warmer, wasn't it?
Yeah,
The
it
medieval New period
slightly,
or whatever
slightly,
it was called.
slightly.
It was
It
warm
was
enough to grow wheat there. It was warm enough to
yeah,
grow wheat there, which isn't anymore. I think you can barely grow potatoes there today.
very difficult, but to grow anything on in Greenland now. But there was a different climate 1,000 years ago. The thing about Iceland is, which is Iceland, by the way, um, is the average temperature of like New Hampshire.
Yeah.
People get that shit fucking twisted. Um, Iceland is not this horrifying. All I, by the way, this makes me I'm gonna be really sad.
Iceland is Iceland.
all I look. This is my sad ass fucking admission. I just want to go to Iceland. I just want to go there, and hang out because I kind of venerate and I love the island so much. I love everything about it. I love their
Yeah,
culture.
you
I love
speak the Icelandic language, don't
a
you?
little bit.
Would you like to translate all this stuff into Icelandic for us, just for like a
What do you want me
project
to
or just for
translate?
like a slightly?
No, it'll take me forever to do it.
No, just Englander's monologue.
Hmm. If you have a monologue, you want me to translate it into Icelandska? I could try to do it,
Wait
but
a
it's
minute,
not gonna.
Englander.
By
I
the way,
think Englander's away. I think Englander is away at the moment.
my
We'll have to
stupid
wait till he
fucking
gets
grammar,
back.
my grammar will be all wrong. By the way, just being clear, like my grammar will be completely incorrect, and I'll probably get a bunch of words
That
wrong. I get words wrong in Spanish, and I should speak Spanish almost fluently, but I can't. Oh well.
I can't speak Spanish at all.
Listen,
What's it like? Whenever I see like a Mexican person in my neighborhood, I'm like, "Oh, buenos dias, buenas noches," or
buenos,
whatever, you know. And
buenos
then they
noches,
try to
yes.
speak to me, and then they try to speak to me in Spanish, and then I have to apologize and say, "Yes, sorry, I only know good
Yeah, yo
morning and
siento,
good
lo
night."
siento. However,
I was just trying to be fun.
I learned Spanish for 4 years. The only languages that I would feel comfortable trying to speak towards people are Spanish, and that one I'm not really comfortable with. The only one I'm actually comfortable with is Japanese. I learned
Yeah,
Japanese
it's
for 15
weird that
years,
that's the one you're
so
best at because it's also like the most alien.
15 years. Because I spent
That's more different from
literally half
English
my
than
life.
Arabic is.
It's I actually speak a little bit of Arabic, and that's
No, I
yeah,
know
I
you read the Quran
right,
cover to
right,
cover.
yeah, I talked about it earlier. So, but the only language I would feel comfortable actually speaking, I can't speak Arabic at all. I cannot. I can only read it, and I can read your alphabet and stuff like that. I can't speak Arabic at all.
Yeah.
I would never deign to say such a thing. I can speak a little bit of Spanish. I can speak a little bit of Icelandic. I speak a little bit of Polish. Japanese is the only language outside of English that I actually feel
It's
speaking to
just
people.
bizarre because it's the most foreign.
It's
Oh,
completely different.
Englander, you're back.
Yes. What have you been
Well,
talking
in
about?
that case, actually, Aiden, if
Mhm.
Japanese is the one you're best at, would you like to translate Englander's monologue on the two thrones into Japanese?
You could give it to me. I don't know. I can try
Englander,
to
put it
translate.
back on the screen and then
Yeah, yeah,
translate.
sure, sure.
Nay, 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 nay. No, this is gonna be great. Like this is gonna be like if you want to do word by word translation, that will take me forever and it will not be fun. No one here will
It
enjoy
doesn't
it.
have to be word by word. I mean, just like take the sentiment of it. If we
Okay.
wanted it word by word, we could put it through Google Translate and get
Yeah,
something
no shit.
reasonably
Well,
accurate.
don't do that. Don't do that. It's real shit. It's real fucking hot shit. Don't put do not
Okay,
put
because I
shit from English to Japanese in Google Translate. It sucks. Awful. It's
okay,
literally the worst. It's so bad, dude. So
okay.
bad.
So Aiden, if we wanted to express the broad sentiments of this monologue, how would we do it in Japanese?
Send it to me so I can see. Itemitai.
I will hold on. I'm just going to change the window. What have you just been?
It's on screen, isn't
Have you
it?
just?
行ってみたいお願いしました。
Have you just been going on off the chart tangents then since I've been gone?
No more tangents. I can do things.
I think we covered everything. How long have we been recording,
A
Englander?
long ass
About
goddamn time.
2 hours, I think. It's not Adam and Sitch
Just
levels just
about.
yet, but it's still quite long.
Please let me see. 見てみて. Oh my god. Also, something you'll find, which I don't mean to do this, but the problem is that like I speak Japanese in a certain accent. It's not on purpose. I just that's how I learned
Which
it. So
accent? Of what region?
Kansai Ben, Kansai accent, Osaka accent. So sorry.
Ah, Osaka. Isn't that in the far south?
Yes, and Osaka. Interesting thing about the accent in Osaka versus Tokyo Ben, but we say Japanese accent, generally speaking, is Tokyo Ben, which is a typical Japanese accent. Um, Kansai Ben, Kansai area accent, is a little bit different. Kansai Ben ni
it's a little bit different in that it's the best way I can always try to explicate to people about how kansebenni works is that in Tokyo ben we would say "Odaijoubu desu ka?" which means how are you doing? Literally, how "Odaijoubu daijou how are you doing?" Kansebenni we might say something like "Mokari ka?" which directly translated means how are you profiting? The same word, same phrase, same meaning, but directly translated is a little bit different. Kansai is if you ever like watch an anime or whatever, and you hear someone speak in Kansai they're almost always depicted as a gangster. That's just the way that Osaka is. It's this is a by the way a stereotype. Not everyone from Osaka is a gangster. My
I know. Well,
sensei was from
isn't that
Osaka.
also where a lot of Korean people in Japan live as well? Because I
Oh, what kind of
understand
Naigedo?
there's a lot of correlation between Koreans and the
I don't know.
mafia in Japan.
What kind of I don't know. My sensei, however, was from Osaka. So my and by the way, it's very near Kyoto, which is
Okay,
the historical capital.
so you speak gangster Japanese.
Yeah, a little bit.
Well, that'd
And
be a bit
I
like in a lot
can't
of
get out
American
of it.
movies, like
Well,
even if it takes place in New York, the only person with a New York accent would be a gangster.
well, here's a funny thing. A lot of Japanese people who want to learn to speak English, which they often want to do, they learn to speak it through movies. So a lot of times when you talk
Okay.
to Japanese people in Japan, they speak English with a weird accent because they learned it through
Huh?
movies, right?
I once
Uh,
actually met a Japanese person who spoke English with a Russian accent because they learned it from a Russian.
it'll happen. It will happen. It happens often. Oftentimes they learn it through movies, which it creates a funny thing as well. Um, but to me, like, when I speak to Japanese people, I'm just saying, like my Japanese is not great. Okay, even though I'm
Uh,
JLPT two. JLPT two, JLPT one means pure fluency. I've passed a JLPT two test, which is like a sub fluency. So I passed the
okay.
test. But hang on. When I speak to Japanese people, oftentimes they will laugh because, first of all, I'm not correct. I say things wrong all the time. I say things wrong, but also
Uh,
they laugh at my stupid fucking accent. And please laugh
uh,
at my stupid fucking accent because they think it's really funny, and they should think it's funny. They have this dumb accent that makes me sound like I have a gangster accent, right? It's no other better way to
be like a
describe
Japanese person when they speak English. They sound like they're from Chicago.
it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I
Demo.
can see how that'd be funny. I can see that'd be funny to
Yeah,
meet
I
like
don't.
a tiny
I don't.
Japanese woman who speaks with a Chicago accent.
Demo. It's difficult. Like, I know. It's difficult. Like for me to fully describe. Like the Japanese accent from Osaka. It's a little bit. The concept ending is a little bit different. But yeah, Japanese people think it's really funny, and it is funny. I suck at Japanese, honestly. At this point, I'm 30. I haven't taken Japanese in now 8 years. So I haven't actively done it, which means my Japanese sucks. Because by the way, let this shit get real fucking clear. If you don't practice a language every goddamn day, you lose it. You absolutely lose it. So, なんでもないね。なんでもない。もいもいもい。だからさ、what do you want me to say? That's always the thing. It's always the thing. It's like when people hear like, "Oh, Aiden speaks Japanese," and it's like, "Well, what do you want me to say?" It's like, 何を話してもいい again. What do you want me to
How long
say?
did it take you
It's
to
like,
learn
what's
Japanese
your
then?
fucking question? Huh?
How long did it take you to learn Japanese then?
I took it through. I started learning Japanese when I was 11 years old,
Okay, wait a
which is
minute. So
actually.
how would a Japanese person understand the Christian or the Abrahamic idea of God?
Yeah.
Ooh.
No. It's actually been a huge issue in Japan. If you want to know about this stuff, um,
Because of like Western missionaries or
Japanese
whatever.
literally crucified Christians, but
Yeah,
literally.
I know. It was in
Okay.
the which century? It was in the near the Renaissance, like in
It,
the
it was in
seventeenth
the
century,
1800s.
It was like that.
eighteen hundreds, late
There was a revolt, wasn't there, in
Yes.
Japan? Christian
in
revolt.
Japan. Oh, that was in China. Was the Christian revolt?
No, the Meiji era.
in the Meiji area.
Mm.
Well, wait a minute. The Meiji
Like,
Restoration, that was after. That was
well,
long
hang on,
after.
hang on. But it was during the Okay, so are you aware about the Meiji era versus the Meiji Restoration one?
Oh, Meiji era. Those are two different time periods.
Yeah.
Okay, because I know the Meiji Restoration, that was in the
But
late 1800s, early
to be clear,
1900s.
what was happening was Emperor Meiji was the
Ah,
emperor. However, the shogunate had taken over control of Japan. Ne? Yep.
right, right. So what year was this?
1500.
15. Okay, okay.
So how many years did it take
Because
them
the
to
Meiji
have
era.
a restoration then? About 200
Well,
years.
the
Let's look up
Meiji Restoration was
when
much
did the
later. The
Meiji?
Meiji Restoration
Meiji.
was hundreds
Yeah.
of years
That's
after the Meiji
1800s.
era.
That's 1800s. It's 1868. That's when the Meiji Restoration happens. However, Christianity comes into Japan in the as late 1500s. Ne?
Yeah.
I have to work myself out of this fucking shit. Don't everyone hates it. I know everyone hates it. I know everyone hates it, and they're like, "Oh, Aiden, you're always wrong." I'm like, however, demo. My Japanese is more e. Ne? It's more. Oh, okay, that's it. Um, sorry. The Meiji Restoration was the fact that they were trying to replace the shogunate, which had been a horrifyingly oppressive system, back onto the throne. To say like, no, we need the emperor back instead of the shogunate, which the shogunate was. Oh, we're getting back to this monarchy thing. The shogunate was a little bit more. It wasn't elected, by the way. It was all none of it was elected at all. Ridiculous. There was no elected system in Japan ever, but the shogunate was kind of like a elected by people who were supportive. No one was doing anything, by the way. Like this was all like it was one monarchy versus another, essentially. Like you want to be really clear about what happened with the monarchy versus the emperor. Excuse me, the emperor Japan versus the shogun. It was just two monarchies that were competing against each other. They were not good systems. They both fucking sucked. However, the monarchy maintained itself and won out in the
Ah,
long run. The shogun was an illegitimate leader, but I mean not by nature of birth.
yeah.
So that's where the shogun came from versus the monarch, the rule of God, if you want to use that kind of word, that kind of
Yeah.
verbiage. That was the
But
emperor.
of course, I would say, of course, it's given this is Japan,
Yeah, I can tell you a whole bunch
particularly
about the
like
Japanese
medieval
history.
Japan. I would just say it's like, well, it's like
Well,
I
with
guess
the
this is where we start to get into funky stuff with like monarchy, because if monarchy is meant to be like selected by God, well then, what about stuff in history like the Japanese,
Mhm.
on like these people that persecuted Christians, etc.
Okay, well, the Japanese people that persecuted Christians were again that was the shogunate. That was not the monarch. It was not
Mm-hmm.
Meiji. That was a shogunate. That was the quote unquote elect. They were not elected, but that was the alternative to the monarch. That was the alternative to the emperor of Japan. Now,
Yeah.
the
Okay.
emperor of Japan is who enacted shit that happened under World War II, and don't get that shit fucking twisted. That was horrifying. But he still had a
Yeah.
shogun.
What wasn't it? What's it like? Wasn't there
Unit
isn't
731.
wasn't weren't the Japanese like the Japanese atrocities considered to be the only thing that rivals the Holocaust?
What happened under Unit 731 are things that I do
Yeah.
believe rival the Holocaust. And let's not get that twisted, because what
What's
Germany
it like?
did,
Worse than the gulags,
what, well,
which is
it's
a
how interesting is it to you? I would ask you this question. How interesting is it that we don't, as a society, consider the things that happened under Soviet Russia or post-Soviet Russia even, um, where they, are you aware of the Kachin massacre, for example? Is
I've
anyone?
heard it
No,
mentioned.
no.
I've heard it mentioned.
The reality is most people are not aware of what they caught. The Soviets just rounded up people, shot them, and put them into a grave. 100,000 Poles. 100,000 Poles. Okay? It's
Yeah.
not. I'm not
In
fucking around
one
about
day.
this. In one day, 100,000 Polish people were fucking put to a mass goddamn grave. No one knows about this. Some people are kind
Mm.
of aware of it, you know.
Yeah,
Ah,
except
was
in
this the thing that
communist Russia.
were the Allies trying to hide this or something? Is to kind of not spoil the relationship
Oh,
between them?
yes.
Whoa, yeah, whoa,
I
why are
remember
we
this
trying
now.
to
Yeah.
hide this?
Mm.
Mm,
What a big question. Why would it be that people
yeah.
don't want to be honest about the Kachin massacre, which is only one of many massacres that was conducted by the Soviets? I mean, and
Portrayed,
one of
yes.
millions. Like, I mean, in terms of like the amount of people
Yeah.
killed, millions and
Well,
millions of
in
people who were
terms of
killed.
raw
But in
numbers,
Kachin,
the
a
Soviets
hundred
killed something.
thousand
Yeah.
people. I could be wrong
Yeah.
with the number, and I'm sorry, YouTube, if you get mad with that, but like,
Oh, yeah.
it's about 100,000 people who were rounded up and killed in mass and put to a mass grave by the Soviets, and I find it
Yeah.
absolutely fucking hideously disgusting. I will not. No, no, fuck off. I won't shut up about it. Sorry.
I understand, and oh yeah, because you speak Polish. I forgot for a second.
A little bit. I have to
My
like
gosh,
switch languages.
yeah, this has been an incredibly informative conversation. It's
Mm.
been awesome having you as a guest, Aiden.
Well, I'm
Um,
I'm an idiot. Sorry.
if we
Well, can I
is there
just jump
anything
in there
else
with
that
the
you would
whole?
like to talk about?
Oh, I'm just going to jump in there with the whole
Okay, go ahead.
focus on these.
They say 22,000. They hit 22,000. That's the official excuse me, official YouTube, excuse me, Wikipedia number is 20,000. But in my opinion, it was probably closer to 100,000 people.
Probably
But
was, yeah.
I'm sure these things need to be exposed. But what this is the kind of these are the tactics of the sort of centre right, I should say. Of
Listen,
Are they not effective tactics? There's a reason why
no,
they
I
use
don't,
them.
this
but
is not
for
effective
what? No,
tactics. Killing that
Right, that's
22,000
true.
yeah,
people
That's true.
no one's saying
Yes,
it's no one's
yes.
saying it's
in
Let's
one
not be
go.
no.
completely cynical. Englander, let's not get completely cynical. The truth does
Mm,
actually matter.
but yeah,
You were saying, Aiden.
Well, no, all I'm saying is that people on the left, people who are currently like, supporting the leftist position, don't understand the fact that a mass execution of at least 22,000 people happened. And that's the best. I believe in general, about 100,000 Poles were killed by under the Soviet Union. But they were 22,000 were killed in one go and buried in a mass grave in Kachin. Why are we not supposed to talk about that? We talk about the Holocaust all the time, which is horrifying, a horrifying abuse of human rights. But why am I not supposed to talk about the Kachin massacre, about how the Soviet Union came in and killed 22,000 Poles? Why am I not supposed to talk about that? Interestingly, I'm not supposed to. I, for whatever reason, YouTube is not cool with me talking about the fact that the 22,000 goddamn Poles were killed. And that's a minimal estimate, by the way. Same with the Holocaust, by the way, because we don't really know how many people were killed in the
Yeah, that's
Holocaust.
true. It's what we. Yeah, it's like what's it like the estimate, like the low estimate is something like 10 million total.
The
Six
low,
million
low
Jews
estimate,
plus
the low
like
estimate.
however many gypsies and.
Well, that's the crazy thing about the Holocaust, which is why I have my only strike on YouTube. Is I said that we don't know how many people were killed in the Holocaust. I got a strike on YouTube for doing that.
I guess
For
they're trying to say it's like, oh, you're trying to say it's less, and it's like,
no,
no,
I
I
was
was
saying I thought it was way
to be
more.
more.
I thought it was way more. You didn't understand me, but that's fine. It's fine. I worded it poorly. I didn't
this is
word
going
it
into
poorly.
some dodgy territory here, is all I'm going to say.
It's fine, but I'm saying I think there was way more than 6 million people died in the Holocaust. I think it was way more
Okay.
people died because that's just the Jewish number. We don't
Yeah.
include the Gypsies. We don't include the Roma. We don't include the um so the Slavs who were killed.
Because it
Right?
was less well cataloged.
Of
All
course it
that
wasn't.
the numbers on all that was much more sloppy because they weren't the main focus like the Jews were.
They weren't
The
they weren't the
Nazis
focus on
didn't.
the left. They're not the
Yeah.
focus on the left for the last
Oh
100 years.
yes, that too. The left doesn't care about Slavs. They
They
don't
don't
care
care.
about the
They don't give a
Gypsies
shit about
because
gypsies. They don't give a shit about
they
Slavs.
don't
They
even
don't.
really care about Jews. It's just
No,
that
not really.
Jews are influential enough in America that it's
But
profitable to pretend to care about them
why does
in a
no
way
one
that it's
care?
not profitable to pretend to care about. As I was
Why does
saying,
nobody?
it's profit.
Here's my real question: 6 million. That's a minimal number. When I said that
Well,
that
yeah,
was a contentious number, what I meant by that is that I think it's way. I think it's closer to like 10 million, 20 million.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
way higher. People misunderstood my statement. That's fine. I phrased it poorly. The reality is, nobody cares about the 22,000 Poles who were killed in a mass grave at
Yeah.
once.
In
Nobody
one
cares about that
day.
in one day, essentially. Nobody cares.
Again,
And
why?
buried
Yeah,
in a mass
yeah.
grave. No one gives a shit
And the
about that.
reason,
Why?
well, I
But
probably
what I'm
just
trying to say is it's
like
something
most
that
more
would.
of the world controllers.
Well, I give a shit about the 22,000 Poles who were killed. I give a shit.
I do too. I do.
What I'm
I
trying to
think the
say is
reason
if you
why
were
that's
to
not
mention
a
that.
thing that is
Sorry, go on.
I think the reason why that's not a thing that is like taught in schools or whatever is like on a long course of
Oh no, because
the
they all approve of communism, and it was
yeah,
communists who did
exactly.
this.
Yes.
Mm,
It's sanitation. It's communist apologetics. Okay. Englander, would you like to continue?
what I was going to mention, this raising that is not. You're not going to be arrested, or it's not something that cannot be raised. It's you got your Jordan Petersons going on about how all these things are occurring. They're not getting censored for it. These
No, you don't get well. I guess you don't get censored. You're just not
Well,
allowed to
actually,
speak
Jordan
about it.
Peterson does get censored. It's just that he doesn't get censored for his anti-communist takes. He gets
mm,
No,
censored for his anti-trans takes.
the fact of the matter is that the Auschwitz stuff, but how it was only focused on Jews, is a little bit of a lie. It was not just Jews. It was not just Jews. They killed
Yeah, well, I
the
know that's a
Germans.
thing actually that a lot of
Exterminated.
contemporary Jewish sources specifically often focus on the suffering of other people like the Poles.
Thank you, and I hope they do. We need to be very clear.
Yeah, I read Maus when I was a kid, when I was about 13 or 14 years old, I
Mhm.
think it was. I read twice actually, because it was such a grim as the book is, it's a very good read, and I recommend everyone to read it. The graphic novel Maus.
A fantastic graphic novel. It will make you cry. You're gonna there. There's scenes in Mouse
Yeah.
that I can't even think about because that make me cry. Um,
Yeah.
horrifying stuff.
Um,
Mouse is a fantastic book.
As I was
It-
saying, one of the things that you can appreciate about that is that the father character that is telling these stories to his son, the comic,
mhm,
or the artist,
mhm, mhm.
specifically goes out of his way to mention like, oh yes, and they did all the same thing to the Poles in very large number.
They did it. They did it to them. And by the way, if you're not aware, Soviets denied the existence of the Kachin massacre until 1991.
Yeah,
So something that they did in 1939, 19, up until 1943, they denied for a half a century. They denied that it even happened. So if you don't think that horrifying things happen in this world and that governments would lie to you, by the way, guys, that governments would not lie to you, be aware that the Soviet government, that great, wonderful Soviet government, that great, wonderful, how wonderful it is to be under communism,
uh-huh.
killed at least, that's what they will admit to, 22,000 Poles,
60.
buried them in a
Oh,
mass grave on one day. 22,000 Poles.
yeah, yeah. I was thinking about but of course there's I thought for a second I thought you were gonna go on about the total number. Supposedly 60 million people were killed in total over the course of the whole Soviet Union history.
Oh, it's way worse. Oh my goodness. That's way hard.
I say
People who were
again, minimum
directly killed by the
estimates.
government.
this is the point,
By the
isn't it? No
government.
one knows.
No, we can never know how many people were killed by the Soviet government because we can never know because they don't keep using they keep records on how many people they killed. This is what we know, that they killed 22,000 minimum Poles on basically one day and buried them in a mass grave. And if anyone thinks that communism's great, and I have some friends who are communists, you can't look at this. And I guess a funny thing. It's not funny. It's actually horrifying. There's a lot of people who in the West, I think in general, who think that who really consider Poles like kind of less than human. I don't know why that is. Yeah, I speak a little bit of Polish.
I've never met anyone who feels that way, but I do know that when my parents were growing up in Ohio, I think I told you about it before. Was that they grew up
Hmm. Hmm.
near my dad in particular grew up nearby to Cleveland.
Yeah.
Um, I knew
I
when
don't.
as a kid you couldn't pick on black people, but you could pick on the Polacks.
Well, of course, you can pick on the
Yeah,
Pollock.
I would probably agree with
That's
that
all
in
horrifying
my
shit.
my own experience.
Poles are. I'm a little bit biased here because I speak a little bit of Polish. I like Polish people. I am, in by the way, genetically Polish at all. I have no Polish DNA, but
Understand?
I really respect the Polish people and their temerity and their incredible ability to survive when everyone is
They
trying
are
to
sort
fuck
of
with them.
well, they are sort of like these stalwart people of the plains that like everyone's always trying to conquer them. Their homeland is kind of flat,
They did a little bit
and
of
then
that
they just
themselves.
refuse to
To be
let it
fair,
happen.
they they
Refuse to
they,
let it
they,
happen.
they did a lot of conquering themselves. The
Yeah. Oh
Polish,
yeah, they did have the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, that
yes,
great empire.
let's be real, they did a little bit. They did a little conquering themselves. But right now, and for the last 200 years, for the most part, Poland has been abused by the rest of Europe and not considered even to be human. Because,
Yeah.
by the way the Soviet Union got away with that was by literally considering Poles to be less than human. Okay, that's how they got away with murdering 20,000 Poles, was by saying they weren't human.
What wasn't that something to do with their policy against the kulaks, against the middle class
Yes,
farmers?
that's how that came out of it. Yeah.
Well, that was more Ukrainians though,
It's
wasn't it?
because the
And by the way,
Poles
it
were
wasn't
well,
just
it was
Poles.
the
It was not.
Ukrainians too. Yes.
It wasn't just Poles. It was Ukrainians. It was Belarusians, and it was Jews that they
Was
fucking
anyone
dropped
who was yeah.
dropped into a giant fucking mass grave.
Well,
That we have no idea actually how many people were killed. That figure, the 22,000 figure, that's a guess. My guess is probably closer to 100,000.
I
But
Probably fair, yeah.
I'm overestimating. But they mass murdered at least 22. Can we even kind of comprehend how huge of a number that is of human beings and human life?
22,000. That's like armies have conquered nation with less men
Yes,
than that.
yes.
mm,
And they killed those people in basically a day. That's what the Soviets did. I would never
That
be
is
able to
but
grim.
the thing is though,
comprehend that kind of level of human death. It blows my mind. I mean, like the Holocaust, way worse, by the way,
Yeah.
in a large scale of things. But what happened in the Soviet Union, I think, well, actually, I don't know. Which is how am I supposed to like compare
well,
like
I
what's
think
worse, the Holocaust versus
I think
Chechen? I don't know.
I think the reason why people would say that the Holocaust is probably more, it's like dreadful. It's just the sheer kind of as we're discussing earlier, the mass and scale. It was it
Industrialism
was
of it.
yeah, it was just
Hmm.
sheer
It's
construction.
procedural.
Yeah, it was construction of factories and what or buildings, whatever, sheer purely for the
Of
purpose of
course they
killing.
did it. That
Yeah,
that, that
literally
they
human slaughterhouses.
just killed them. No, that's the worst part. They didn't actually just kill the Jews. They forced them into slavery.
Mm,
That's the part that's so horrifying about it. They forced them into human slavery, and that and to work in factories, and that's worse in my opinion, actually, maybe than just killing somebody, just to force them to be a slave. I
Oh yeah, because
that
they killed them in a humiliating way. They
yeah,
worked them to death and they gassed them like rats and all sorts of
yeah,
horrible things.
horrifying, absolutely incomprehensible human evilness. I don't know what's worse. I don't know if it's worse to be a slave or to be killed. I don't know what's worse. Um, these are philosophical questions that I don't have the answer to. I would say that maybe being a slave is worse than just being killed, but I don't know. I don't have a good answer to that.
Given my understanding of pre-industrial history, I would say that death probably is worse than slavery. Like, what's it? Would you
I
rather die, or would you rather be
a slave.
or would you rather be like a cotton slave in 18th and 19th century America?
I mean, I don't know. I think I'd rather die, and that's why many slaves tried
Okay.
to escape because they didn't care.
I
It
know,
was
but
better
like,
for them to die.
what's it like? If you, I know, and I don't mean to be any kind of apologist for slavery, but
Hmm. Hmm.
if you look at the circumstances that slaves lived in America for most of America's
Which were
history,
horrible. but hang on,
which were bad conditions, but they weren't as bad as the peasants of Europe.
and they weren't actually as bad
No,
as
at least a slave got meat at least once a day.
and they
Well, they were
also
better.
they were not as bad as the conditions that they were put to work in under Nazi Germany, and
Yeah.
they were slaves in
I
that.
mean, as we were just saying, the medieval serfs. I would say that
Yeah.
it's
The
because
medieval serfs had half the year off
mm,
again.
but
Just
Well,
just
actually,
put the
peasants, not so much
context.
serfs. Serf is
Yeah, yeah,
one thing. It's something that specifically existed in Russia. They were treated pretty much like
sure,
slaves. They were literally bought and sold in between nobles, and they
precisely.
were
Actually, you're
worked a
correct.
lot
Correct.
more
Yes,
than
thank you.
well, bear in mind we
most
had
working
serfdom here
men and
until sort of
peasants.
until the
However,
15th century.
under the European monarch,
I thought it was
under
the 1300s in England.
in
It,
the king of
'Cause,
under the king
wasn't
of
no, it
England.
was properly phased
I,
out
I
in the sort of
yes,
15th, 16th century.
yeah, you're completely correct. So for the most part, under the king of England, after the 15th century, which it was an issue, it was a huge problem. Of course, it was. But after that, when it got the Robin Hood era, by the way, under the Robin Hood era, which is what we get told as Americans is like the worst time in all history
Yeah,
of,
like
of how
King John.
under King John, who was fucked up. Why? Because Richard Lionheart was off doing the crusade, which he shouldn't have done.
Yeah.
But regardless, he did. King John, who sucked. The reality is that Robin Hood was a monarchist. He supported Richard Lionheart. He just didn't support King John. That's all it was.
Because King John was a
Well,
bastard.
as you mentioned in
He
your
was a
essay,
bastard. I did, as I did. But the reality is, be really clear about this stuff. Like all have been told about how bad monarchy.
though, have you there? Oh no. Apologies for the interruption on my end, at least. Uh, well, this is slightly inconvenient, but I suppose we'll wait a little bit longer and see if anything comes back. But it was a very I just wanted to mention it was kind of very interesting to bring on this side of things because I'm certainly not an anarcho-monarchist as Paladin is, so it was interesting to speak, about some of the ideas she had, and I suppose we dipped into some pretty dark territory in just the last few sort of 10 minutes or so. But um, it's been some good chats. I hope you've all enjoyed it. If I manage to get back a Wi-Fi connection, hopefully you'll be able to carry on. There we go.
Can't place any of this shit into a vacuum. You have to understand where it comes from. Why did Germany do what it did in
Sorry,
World War
what
II?
did I miss?
Why did they
My
get so
Wi-Fi
upset?
went out there.
Sorry?
Dear.
Did I miss anything?
Linder's Wi-Fi cut
Yeah,
out for
missed
some
about
reason.
5 minutes.
I don't
What
think so. Oh dear.
what have you been?
Aiden went on a big. It was basically
Huh?
a continuation of the tangent we were on
Oh,
before.
I'm
She was
always on a
going on
tangent.
about
I'm always on a tangent, man.
Don't worry, I'm the same way. Just it. Should I
I just
be
want
more
Polish. I just
assertive?
don't want
Should I
Polish
try
people.
and?
I don't want Polish people to
I
be their history to be forgot because it is being forgot. That's what makes me
yeah.
really upset. The fact that the Soviets killed at a very historical minimum, 20,000 Poles and Jews and Ukrainians and Belarusians. They they put them in a fucking mass grave. Don't forget that ever.
since
22,000.
since we're on this subject, I did want to make a point before we left it last time. What I so your reason that you said that people didn't want to say this information to or teach this information to kids is because they're secretly sympathetic, but are they really? Do they really have any sympathies to the Soviet Union? That's not the kind of I don't.
I think they do. I think they are sympathetic towards the Soviet Union. That's why I don't want to teach things like about the Kachin massacre. For the fact that it makes me sincerely upset. Like I'm actually legitimately upset right now just thinking about it. I don't think that the teachers want, because the teachers for the most part have been indoctrinated themselves into the Ibram X Kennedy kind of racialized Soviet style communism,
But I don't
which
think they
is
want. They
if
don't
you
want the
haven't,
Soviet
please go
Union.
watch James Lindsay. Go watch James Lindsay's entire series, which is massive. James Lindsay's series on this, but how he explains how this is indoctrinated into educators. Watch that. It's horrifying. And I've read the research. I've read a bunch of it. I've read it. The 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 educators in America are communists. People who are influencing American educators are communists. They're direct, overt communists. Sorry, continue. I'm sorry I cut you off.
Well, I find that I can't see anyone really really sort of trying to endorse any of the actions of the Soviet Union or try and sort of bring it out as this ideal sort of
Really?
symbol because
I would say it doesn't have to be deliberate. They could be doing it
well
subconsciously.
I don't think that's what they want though because
You're incorrect, actually, my dude. Again, go watch James Lindsay's reporting on this because he's read all the research more than I have. I've only read a couple of these scholars, and I'm using scholars in a a very nice term, so I'm not trying to be rude. I've read these scholars as well. I did a video series on it like 2 years ago now, and the reality is that the people who are promoting this stuff, this critical race theory, they are socialists, not just socialists, but they are communists, and they are precisely driving all of their research on early analysis that was from the Soviet period. They're driving all of their understanding from the Soviet. These people are pure on fucking Soviets, okay? In terms of their analysis, they're full on commies.
but they don't want a Stalinist nationalistic militaristic
Yes, they
state.
do.
No,
Yes, they
they
do.
don't.
Yes, they do. Actually,
That's far more.
They just don't want it.
look at their research. Look at their writing. Look at their writing. Look at their writing of, and not just Ibn Kennedy
They're going to
is
be
a
doing
They're
it
not.
under a
well,
different
They're not
context
gearing
because the
us towards.
context always changes.
We're not being geared towards a
Well,
Soviet too or anything like that. It's a far different
I'd
thing.
say Englander, I would say kind of are. It's just with a different aesthetic because the
I,
times have
I
changed.
don't mean to be rude, but I think you're incorrect on this. I think you're incorrect. I think you're wrong. They do want a Soviet system. They want it, and like if you look at their research and where they come from, it's horrifying.
Um, Now I don't want to sound like too much of a Tim Pool shill, but
No, don't.
I think that I
Go
think
ahead.
that when Tim Pool says these modern day people are just, or well, Sargon says it too, so I guess I'll
Hmm.
quote from him instead. These like the left wing today are race socialists. They're
Yes,
effectively the same thing as the Nazis. They're just trying to recontextualize Marxist theory
yes,
in a
they are.
racial lens, and the only thing that separates the modern era from history is the fact that they are placing non-whites at the top of that hierarchy.
You're completely correct. And well, I guess that's what Sargon says, but
Is that a good
with
note to end? Is that a good note to end on?
probably all I would say, dude, is
Okay.
that like if you look at the research, you look at their data, the things that they write, not just Ibn X Kennedy, not just Ibn X Kennedy, because I know he's the boogeyman. But I would highly
My
recommend
my
you
dad
look.
just got back from work. I gotta go.
Take care.
Lovely
Um,
talking to you guys.
It was a great
Pleasure
discussion.
meeting
I'll see you in a
you.
bit.
If you
I
look at
can't wait to upload this episode.
uh,
Englander, you and Aiden keep talking until you get to like a nice end with this
Okay.
Ibram X
Yeah,
Kennedy
sure.
stuff. I'll go.
well, I guess so. I'll just try to finish it off. If you look at sort of that uh, James Lindsay has been uploading, Particularly about like people like geez, their names escaping me. Um, I can't remember any of the names. Christ. Um, there's a lot of people who were doing this research, and I'm putting research in like 1,000 quotes. But please check out New Discourses by James Lindsay because he is reading all this stuff. He reads it basically live in front of people. He reads it for you to show what the hell these people thought and what they were believing and what they were advocating for in the early 1900s. This is not a new idea. This is old as hell. They were advocating for this communistic crap 100 years ago. And by the way, most of them were pedophiles. I'm just being completely real about it. Most of them were pedophiles. Like
Well,
I'm just being completely fucking real about it. Most of them were pedophiles. Okay.
perhaps they
And
are drawing on some of the Marxist theory of the 19th century or whatever it is. But what I feel like the ideal Soviet man is the kind of the masculine, the kind of working for the state and towards it. What I find today is that they're
sure.
giving us towards an entirely different thing where it's consuming utterly indifferent and completely just um, sort of completely indulgent and just utterly almost inhuman.
Well, sure. That's what they've told you what they mean. Is that what they actually mean? Let me ask you this question. Where does communism come from? What's the purpose of communism? What's the purpose? Please, if you this is not a gotcha.
But
What do you
to
think the
bring
purpose
us
of
to
communism is?
communism, to a
No,
place
no, no.
to
What is the purpose of communism? Like, why is it a good or bad system? I would ask you, like, would you be willing to steel man it? Steel man it, but like, if you'd like to, like, what's the purpose of communism? Because I'll steel man it if you don't are not willing.
so you want me to say what their end goal is then?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, well
What's the purpose?
it's a society based on equality, complete and total equality without any kind of hierarchical system.
But that's not how. Now you're correct. That's the stated purpose. Correct. However, we both know that's not how communism actually manifests.
No, but that's
Ever.
the theoretical end goal was what they were trying to seek.
Precisely. Um, that's the theoretical end goal, which it sounds great. Sounds great. Get rid of all animosity. Get rid of all inequality. However, that is not actually the real purpose of communism. The real purpose of communism is, in fact, to harm people who disagree and to create a new class structure based on different different paradigm than currently exists. Because you're always going to have a class structure that will always be. You can't get rid of it. Even Marx understood this. Well, in fact, Marx most importantly understood this. You can't get rid of a class structure. Sure, class structure. It's going to happen. His instead proposal, and the proposal of most communists, is to subvert society, to destroy it, and then hopefully out of the ashes we would come up with a classless system. However, it's not a pure classless system because, of course, we, those who did the destruction, would be in charge. It is not a classless system. It is not based on liberty or freedom. It is a system based on totalitarian system, and we have to be very clear about that. In my opinion, very clear about how horrifying Marxism is. And Marx himself was well aware of this. Like, don't get it twisted. Marx was very aware of what he was advocating for. Where he maybe thought that maybe he didn't think he would be the king, but he that's by king I'm putting on very very a whole bunch of quotations because a true king is not someone who was elected by the majority.
Well,
But
it's a common element of the left is to say, oh yeah, certain leader did X, but Marx, he didn't do anything. His goals and his ideas are actually very good,
yeah,
and they can be realised if we just do it in the
yeah.
right
But have you
method.
read Marx?
No,
Exactly, that's the thing. But have you read Marx, my dude?
no, I actually
He
haven't.
first of all he hates the Jew. No, I know. I don't know if you have. But if the left had read Marx, first of all he hates the Jews. To be really clear, he's
Mm,
extremely anti-Semitic, and I mean in a true sense. I don't mean like fucking driving around at like this time of night. Goddamn, he's extremely anti-Semitic because he's a racist in every fucking level. Of course he is.
mm,
You're being super confused by a kind of like paradigm that does not it's not actually going to help you. It makes you feel nice. Be very aware of what's happening to you here if you're on the left. the Marx is not going to help you, and no one's going to help you. You're not going to be helped. All of this is bullshit. A monarchy might help you, but unfortunately, I'm considered a joke for saying a monarchy might help you. The reason they feel that way is because they've been indoctrinated. That's fine, but like, that's what I think.
AA.
Sorry,
This is all right. I don't tend to talk very much. So I just kind of like to let people ramble on and hear what they say. So.
no, I'll ramble forever. Please, please, no, please. I would like to know your opinion on this entire spiel I've been on.
So what I can understand where you're coming from, but the what AA was kind of getting across
Mhm.
recently is while during the Cold War, when the Soviet Union was viewed as the kind of ultimate enemy, ultimate bad guy, they were forgetting the huge amounts of subversion that was going on within their own states that was not necessarily openly Soviet in
Yeah,
nature.
yeah. Well, no one knows about that
Mm,
outside of the people who lived through it, right?
yeah, I
It's
guess the
they didn't
means
keep it.
is
They
one.
didn't keep any. Of course, the Soviet Union didn't keep any track of that.
Yeah,
So the only people you can listen to are people who lived through it.
yeah. I'm just trying to. I think the means are entirely different than what the Soviets did. They're not going for they're not going for massacres. They're not going for whatever. It's um, the way that they would take control over the um, common masses is in an entirely different way. Partly
Mhm.
because of technological growth, actually.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's. Do
Well,
you think that's? Is there any closing remark you want to have? It's probably a good place to end, I'd imagine.
probably a good way to end. I think it's a good way to end. I don't know where that happens. I'm sorry. I've gone off the goddamn rails. Um, that being said, don't trust the freaking Soviets on anything they said. On that or on any point, don't trust the goddamn Soviets. They killed 20,000 Poles, at least 20,000 Poles and Jews and Ukrainians, and they buried them in a mass grave. I'm sorry I keep harping on this, but it's very important for people to understand if they've never heard this before, because the reality is most people have not. Most people have never heard. Everyone knows what the Holocaust is. Everyone knows. But almost very, very few people know about the Kachin massacre.
No.
Where I would imagine they say 22,000, but I would imagine it's probably up to about 100,000 people were fucking buried in a mass grave. And the reality is that, like, don't get the shit twisted where you think that if you are of the opinion that communism is a better way to organize society, it is not. It does result in mass murder.
I
It does
hope
every
that's
single time.
not what you're thinking. I'm implying. I'm
No,
just.
I know. Could you reiterate? That was my ending point, but could you reiterate what your ending point was?
It mainly was that I feel like this is. I feel like in the current age we're living in, this is different than to what the Soviets um,
I don't think you're.
were doing.
So I'll tell you why I don't think that's correct. This is my. I'll go into another like conspiracy theory.
Go
As
on.
I explicated my giant, silly, stupid ass document, democracy always moves towards totalitarianism. It always does. This is not my theory. By the way, it's Plato's. So I'm like new on this. I mean, Plato could be wrong, but you gonna talk shit about Plato? Go ahead, talk shit about Plato. Say he's wrong. This is me quoting Plato. Is that democracy moves inherently towards fascism and totalitarianism. It does inherent. That's the next step, and we are in that right now. We have been in it for the last 100 years, by the way, of the slow march of democracy, which, by the way, Hitler was elected. The slow march of democracy towards totalitarianism. That will happen inherently. It is going to happen. There's no way to stop it. I can't stop it. Me talking about shit on YouTube is not gonna fucking fix this.
It's done in a much subtler way, though.
Right? Could you say again?
It's done in a much more subtle way, though.
Yes, exactly. It's just because it's subtle doesn't mean it's not happening.
Mm.
It's moving increasingly towards totalitarianism. Um, that's horrifying, but that's the way things are gonna work, I guess. Um, I don't know what to tell people to do, by the way, because voting won't work. Voting won't. Well, we've made that very clear in the United States. Like voting's done. Voting's over. It your vote actually doesn't. Don't, I can't say to me. Is it being uploaded to YouTube? I can't say, sir. So the reality is, well, as Brandon said yesterday, Brandon himself said that, like, well, if we lose, if the Democrats lose in any kind of way, then it was the result of subversion and cheating. How interesting.
Yeah, well, the question I've been having a lot about the whole meddling, I guess, is probably the
Mm-hmm.
best way for YouTube to describe it. How long has it been going on for, and was it just in 2020 that they had to
No,
put out all the
it's
stocks?
been going on for. Democracy is always a system. We should never engage in democracies. Democracies are bad. I know that upsets people. I'm gonna say it. Democracies are bad systems. Um, the reason why democracies are bad is because you are electing somebody who has no responsibility to you. The monarch owns the land, therefore the monarch is responsible to the land. That doesn't mean a monarch will be great. I'm not gonna like sing praises of the queen. By the way, I mean would sing more praises towards the queen if she actually did anything. But she won't because it's been taken over by democratic.
Mm,
Um, anytime a democratic system takes hold, there's no responsibility, there's no accountability. So it's basically people can do whatever the fuck they want, and that will often, and if not often, always mean tyranny. That's my
well,
opinion.
I guess we'll end it there then. That was
I
a
guess we have to end it there.
yeah, but that
I
was
hope that it was an interesting conversation. I hope I gave
well.
my best.
No, it was really good. I also really I did really enjoy your manifesto as well, even though it was
Oh, my horrible manifesto. I'm so sorry for having to read that.
no
I felt
honestly
really
it
bad.
was I'll keep it somewhere and pop back to it if I ever want to a bit
Keep
of
it, because I guarantee it's correct. I guarantee it's just a little bit correct. A little bit.
mm, well
So,
it's well that was a I was going to mention before at the start. I can't believe I'm talking to someone with 121,000
mm,
subscribers. Madness, and never thought I'd be here
I don't
before.
give a shit. Well, here's the funny thing. People think that because I have, by the way, 120,000 subscribers is not that much in the big
No, what I'm
big
saying
scheme
is
of
that
things.
if it's a bit, I feel like it's mad talking to anyone of any reputation within the right.
I don't give a shit. I don't give a fucking shit. I don't give a fucking shit at all. That's
No,
ridiculous.
I care
First
though.
of all, I also care because I want to bring up people who have lower subscriber counts, I guess, and bring them up and make sure that they also get their voices heard. It's the only thing that I can do. I don't have much other capacity or ability to do anything to help people. That's one thing I guess I can do is to talk to people and be like, hey, like put
Hmm.
my fucking name in your podcast or whatever, and to be able to raise a subscriber count. You shouldn't like I've destroyed my own name, by the way. I've destroyed it by becoming a monarchist. I've destroyed my entire brand. It's over. Everyone thinks I'm an idiot now.
Well, what were
As a
you?
monarchist, I'm destroy my brand.
What's been your
It's
political journey
whatever.
then?
How I became a monarchist? I've actually been a monarchist for the last 4 years, but I only came out about it recently.
Were you in the
Coming out
kind of
about it was
anti-SJW sort of anti-feminist circles? Back in 2016, that kind of time.
yeah. I actually I'm very good. Don't call me pals, but I'm friends with Karen Strawn and the Honey Badgers.
Mm.
I actually came up most of the way that I came up, I guess, was as an anti-feminist, um, as a pro-Trump supporter. But the and by the way, I am completely against feminism. I hate feminism. I'm very. Some of the things that I have to say about men's rights are probably even too aggressive for the Honey Badgers. In that, my opinions towards men's rights are very. Um, I think honestly, I don't think women should be allowed to vote. That's my opinion. I think till 19. Look, I know it's funny. It sounds funny, but I truly believe that women,
No,
myself included,
I
should not
probably
be allowed
agree.
to
Yeah,
vote. We should not be allowed to
but
vote
it's not
because we make the
it's
emotional
not
decisions.
it's not just women though, is it? It's I'd probably just argue most people
A
shouldn't be able
lot
to
of
vote.
people I don't think should be allowed to vote.
Mm,
Well, I have a big list of my voting criteria.
yeah. Well, Lobster put it quite well earlier ago. He was kind of saying how there should just be like the old wise men being if anyone has a vote, it's those kind of the patriarchs of the family.
Well, if you read through my not my proposal that I read through, but I have another proposal which if you would like to read
Where is it?
Yeah, if
I have
you
a posted
send
somewhere.
it to Lobster and he'll pass it over to me.
That includes some. It's my notes that includes notes from Eric von Kuhnhautlinen, which I would very very highly recommend. If anyone is trying to understand democracy, republicanism, and monarchy, please read Eric von Kuhnhautlinen. He's a genius. Okay, in my opinion, not the only one, but he is a genius. He should be respected. Nobody knows who the fuck he is. He was a genius who wrote about democracy and monarchism, and he should be respected, but nobody knows who he is. Please read Eric von Kuhnhautlinen if you want to understand that kind of stuff a little bit better. I have to go pee, so I'm gonna go pee. Take care. Bye.
Oh, okay. Well, since this is probably Lobster's, well, it is Lobster's, will be on Lobster's channel. I probably best end it there since, we went on a bunch of tangents and whatever. Thank you all for watching. I guess we kind of just took over his stream by the end of it, but it's been some great discussion. I'm glad to have had Aydin Paladin on, and I guess I'll see you all later. That's the end. That's the end of the Truckcast. Goodbye.